want to go ahead and get started. You're going to do the introduction, correct? Okay.
Are you ready?
We're ready. Everybody ready?
Let's go.
As ready as I'm going to be. Let's put it that way.
Well, Commissioners, I just want to kick off the budget meetings that you requested. Every department is scheduled over the next 2 days. We'll go until however long you need today. I would imagine we'll be done before noon. Then tomorrow will be a little bit of a longer day, and hopefully we can wrap everything up. The process, each department will come in, they will present their budgets, and if you have any questions, you'd be encouraged to ask those questions, take notes. However, that's not the end of it. So after we get through all of the budgets, the next 3 weeks, I will be scheduling budget review on each agenda for regular Wednesdays, whether we need it or not. It'll be on the agenda. So if over the next 3 weeks you have more questions as you go through the budget, I want to give you time to process through. This is a lot of information on a lot of departments. But if you have other questions, I encourage you to visit with me in my office. But if you have things that you want to discuss about the budget in general, you can discuss that over the next 3 weeks. July 12th is the date that we need to finalize, and so that we can send out the revenue neutral notice. So that is kind of the process. What I would like to do, though, at the end of tomorrow, is get some direction from the board on where the items that you know you want us to work on, and if you have a target for me to go back and try to do it, I'd be most appreciative that the sooner I get that, the better. Or if you all think that by July 12th you can have it all resolved, I'd be happy to work with you on that. So, that's kind of my kickoff. I wanted to give you a little bit of time too.
What you have in front of you are what the department submitted. Mark has made no changes to those at this point, and so it is important, to review it. This will be the first look that you guys have, and this is exactly what was put in front of us to put the budget books together for you guys. We can talk about year-to-date numbers if you want. We can look at really any sort of question. We can talk about equipment reserve money. We can talk about capital money. Whatever you guys want to discuss. I know that Mark will be able to answer those questions for you.
And that touches on a good subject. Kind of kicked off, you'll notice it throughout the budget on the different departments. A lot of them you'll notice lease payments. For the last couple of years, we've been paying the lease payments out of the equipment reserve because we used to depreciate the vehicles and set the money aside in equipment reserve, and now that we're leasing those vehicles, there's no need to do that, but we needed to spend the money out of those depreciation funds. So this year, most of the departments have spent that money out, and so you'll see the full hit of their lease payments.
Mark, and just one question. I think you already answered though. The numbers we see here is before you've had a chance to sit down with the elected officials, or you have had no conversation with.
The county commissioners requested that you meet with the departments this year in every department. So there were a few departments that I sat down just so I would make sure I understood their budget.
Okay.
But there are no changes in these documents from what was submitted to me and the clerk. There's no changes in those documents. Now, there may be some items in here as some people come in, they might point out some things, because I did notice a few things that I thought were probably a little out of kilter, so they'll probably bring those up.
Well, that's what I was hoping for. Okay, thank you, Mark.
I think the lease payments is what kind of opened my eyes up a little bit.
Yeah.
Some pretty big increases.
Yeah, and again, we were spending down the equipment reserve,
Right.
So that's why you see that. But I will tell you, overall, the leases are working out in our favor for the county.
I think they are. I think they are. Yeah.
Maintenance on vehicles is way down. Obviously, we had vehicles that had 150,000 miles on them, but $5,000 to $6,000 a year into on the road. Now that's going towards lease payments. Not only that, but the image. I think the council.
And no more holes in the floors and stuff?
Yeah, we see outside the vehicle, inside the vehicle, not looking through the window. Yeah, hear those. So those are no longer. So our maintenance is way down. Almost all of our vehicles are under warranty, so we don't have those unexpected costs. And when we are turning the vehicles in, we are getting, in some cases, especially on the pickups, we're getting more on the turn-in than we paid for them over the 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So
Good.
If we were purchasing these vehicles, there would be a huge increase in availability. Would be
yeah, and that we did struggle with that these last couple of years is just getting the vehicles in. But now they're getting caught up, and that's another reason why you see these lease payments going up, because for a year and a half we couldn't even get what we were ordering because of the shortage
Right.
in general. So they are now getting caught up.
And in visiting with Frank, it should lower each year now.
Yeah.
This budget is probably the most you will see as far as payments go.
Okay.
And so I think that's an important.
I think that in regular, in most of them, but there will be some like in public works where they have the big equipment, where we are transitioning from a buyout, guaranteed buyout, to just straight up lease. So we won't have any equipment being traded in on those in the future. That's probably 3 to 4 years out. You start seeing on these, as we start turning them in, we'll start getting the money
The
back
credits
on
back,
vehicles,
right.
So that goes directly towards reducing the future lease payments.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you ready to
Connie?
hear from Connie? This is the budget for the Council on Aging.
And I think our safety comments that we will segue right into her budget, because she has a lot of vehicles.
Lots of leased vehicles.
Lots of leased vehicles.
I do have lots of leased vehicles. This is my first time doing this, Commissioner, so where do you want to start?
I just got a question real quick, Madam Chair. Thank you. I just had a question real quick before we kick off. And this is overall, on these vehicle lease agreements, were these set up before that we signed off in the county and we approved these in the past? That's why, are these new lease agreements we're looking at now?
So we agreed
2
4
years.
years ago,
Has it been
probably.
that long?
Yeah, I went around where it done.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's why I was
Yeah,
asking.
4 years ago, we signed a master lease agreement
Okay.
through Enterprise.
Enterprise,
And
correct.
they manage our fleet rotation. They help us
Gotcha.
both acquire and dispose of the leased vehicles. For the most part, they come in fully ready to go. So it's
Turnkey.
Yeah, they put the decals on and everything.
Okay.
So we also, through them, and that's some of the lease payments you see, we have fleet tracking and video in the vehicles as well. So at any given time, we have had some vehicles stolen in the past, and we were able to
Yeah.
locate those using our
Yeah.
GPS. And so that's also figured into that lease payment. But yeah, so now every year when the fleet renews, it's automatic through the lease expires, vehicle goes in, a new vehicle comes out.
Okay. Thank
I
you.
guess it was before the pandemic.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
started.
we
I
did
didn't
that.
recall it
But
doing
yeah,
that.
that was
Yeah.
still when
Time
Commissioner
flies, I guess.
It was right at the start.
Chimke was
Right.
still
Right
in.
at the
That's,
start.
and then that's when availability became an issue.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to start, thinking about personnel at the Council on Aging, we'll just kind of walk through the narrative. We have 31 full and part-time positions there. 30 positions are designated as IOCs. Those positions fill a very specific need at a very specific time of the day. Most of those folks help with meal delivery between the hours of 9 and noon, and then they go home each day. In this budget, I have proposed the addition of a part-time activities specialist. We've more than doubled participation at the Council on Aging since opening in our new building to help with that and to ease the pressure of facilitating all of the activities by one person. And we've increased our volunteers to 120 this year, which helps offset the cost of personnel at the Council on Aging. Most of those are Meals on Wheels drivers, and they use their own vehicles and their own gas during
I
that
think
time.
that it needs to be really highlighted, the amount of money that having volunteers saves on a budget, because, and we need to look at how much that actually does save, because there's a tremendous, you go with taking a per hour rate and benefits and things and look at what we would be having to spend.
And because of that, we can use our IOCs for about 1,000 hours a year. We've capped hours for specific people. So overall, total personnel is an increase of 2% for us from last year's budget because of the strategic use of those folks at different hours of the day. You can see the contractual items there that we're asking for no increase.
I had a question on the last. How many positions did you have in 2022 and 2023? Do you have that?
We had 60 in 2020 last year. We added a position this year, and we repurposed a couple of positions to help in different ways in different departments.
So in 2020, that's 2022. You had 60, or what?
We had 60.
You have 60 now. Correct.
Right.
So it's the same number.
You're asking.
And we're asking to add a position.
We're asking to add one. So we had one. We lost 4 positions last year, repurposed and lost those completely when we moved to this position, and then we repurposed some that we had open to use in different ways. So that's
Okay,
where we have
thanks.
60. Sure. For decreases, like Mark mentioned, we have cut our vehicle maintenance in half because of the newness of our fleet. That's a $7,500 decrease. We've also cut out any unnecessary service maintenance and contracts for another $2,000 decrease. Moving more digital is helping decrease the need for copies and different office supplies and things like that. Places where we're asking for increases, that's where you see lease payments. So because of the availability and of vehicles and the timing of that, we were hoping to phase in our vehicles more slowly to be able to take that from our equipment reserve and kind of phase that in. Unfortunately, we had to take vehicles when they became available. Some of them were vehicles that another company had purchased and were unable to complete that contract. So a really nice vehicle came available to us, and that's that one black van in our fleet at a reduced rate. We also acquired 3 Ford Explorers, a little bit different vehicle than we originally thought we'd have as a part of our lease, but they were available, and we had no idea when the rest of the fleet would be available at the time that those vehicles did. So a little higher lease payment, also higher resale when we turn that vehicle over. We did phase money out of our, we paid lease payments $65,000 for the last 2 years out of our budget, and then took the rest out of our equipment reserve. We have exhausted our equipment reserve this year with the payments that we have, so that's resulting in that $200,000 increase for lease payments. But that is the bulk of our fleet. It's now flipped from what it was. And then the other larger increase is in meals. Our Meals on Wheels program continues to grow. We served about 92,000 meals. We're projecting in 2024 we'll serve right about 99,000, maybe even 100,000 meals in budget year 2024. So as soon as we lose someone off of our meals program, there's 3 or 4 waiting in the wings.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's not going to change anytime soon. As our
Boomers are aging.
boomers are aging into Meals on Wheels
Thank you very much,
qualifications.
Vicki.
How many vehicles are in your fleet?
31.
That's down from what it used to be, correct?
That's right at about where it's always been. Yeah.
I was saying when I first came on, you had 36 vehicles.
And they're
31
out all the
since I've
time.
been here.
Well, I'm pretty sure when
They had to have
I came on, there
36.
was
So
36 vehicles.
We had several that were not actually on the list because they were just old and the vehicles were so unreliable.
Yeah.
They had to leave 2 of them set
Right.
apart.
Everybody had to have a spare.
So that
Yeah.
when the other ones were done, they had, and that was no joke. They really did have, and I think they had 2 in Tonganoxie and actually 2 or 3 here in Leavenworth.
in the
At one time as backups.
in the appraiser's office, we had about 5 or 6 extra cars because you always had 5 or 6 in the shop.
Is that right? Wow, that's
Yes,
terrible.
and so the expansion of the Meals on Wheels program now necessitates that every one of those vehicles is used every day.
They are too. I mean, that parking lot empties
And these,
in the mornings.
this is a result of not keeping up with replacing vehicles. It's no different than our bridge program.
Kicking the can down the street.
Yep.
I have a question. Connie, do you limit Meals on Wheels? Like you said, 1 drops off, 3 or 4 come on. Do you have to tell folks no sometimes, or do you try to always accommodate?
So at different points in time in different cities, we might have a wait list just because of the nature of food safety and getting the meals and what we can accommodate in a vehicle. It's a little tougher in Tonganoxie. For example, we have 3 drivers who are out there. The max they could take is 40 meals at a time. So occasionally we'll have a wait list of 1 or 2 that are on there. We've tried not to have a wait list, but just for the nature of where people are located and the ease of getting them on a route, it may take us 2 or 3 weeks to get that figured out. But at this time, we haven't limited Meals on Wheels service and have tried to accommodate adding a volunteer route, different things, refiguring routes, reconfiguring them to accommodate. We've added volunteer routes for the first time last year in Basur and Tonganoxie. We have 2 volunteer routes in Tonganoxie and 1 in Basur, which has never before happened.
Connie, this is one of those items that I think seeing the tax dollars being spent on is very positive. I think that I've looked at your numbers when you bring your report in, and I know the cost, but the cost has gone up. But to help people in the community and actually give something back, and especially the way you run your department, I've been very pleased with that. We knew the cost was going up, and those are good meals. When I deliver them, I have to stay away from the back of the van so I won't
It smells
test
good,
anything.
doesn't it?
Not really, you qualify.
Yeah, I know. That's true.
We'll bring
You know, one of the
I
things
think
that-
all of us
Mike,
You know, and I think that one of the things that I'm just going to point out because with the volunteers and with the people that are paid, they take a lot of pride in the upkeep of the vehicles that they're using. I mean, they're up forever, dusting and wiping off and cleaning windows. I mean, they take a lot of pride. So our employees and our volunteers also are taking good care of the vehicles as they're.
And understanding the need for transportation, the need for Meals on Wheels, most everything else in the budget is pretty tight, down
I saw
to
that,
the
yeah.
dollars. And we really have worked to move to digital to save as much money as we could on office supplies and things because we know there's this increasing need to feed people.
I think also, since the chairperson said, is that I just want to reiterate, to have that many volunteers serving us like that, that's just unbelievable.
It's amazing.
That's a great thing.
the compliments that I've heard from the county on the quality of food
Exactly.
that the people receive, and
I agree.
Because they're
I
not going to eat
know
it.
folks that get it that are just thrilled. And think Connie and her team do a marvelous job.
We tried to offset that with our different fundraisers, grants that we apply for. Any local grant that we have the ability to apply for, we do. State and federal grants as well, to offset the cost of those, of the number of people who are aging into the need for Meals on Wheels.
And then speaking of your fundraisers, just, I know this is off the topic of the budget, but it's an opportunity to point out to people that we're changing the date.
Yes, November 4th is the date.
Is the new
Our
date.
fundraiser is the new date.
Right, I
Any
just
reason
think,
you had to change it?
Another nonprofit in town is holding a Dueling Pianos.
At the
We
same
have
time.
October 14th. They're holding their Dueling Pianos fundraisers, which is what we were doing on the same day in Leavenworth, different location. So we're going to move ours out to November 4th to accommodate both.
that was just, because I think the sooner we get that out there, because we had all the information out saying save the date and all those things, and now we're having to.
Just locked down a new date with the entertainer as I was walking out the door. So
Is that Jeff, the entertainer?
No,
Not this year. Yeah, I just
not a
want.
guest appearance.
Oh, I'll be there. Yeah,
You play
my
the
band won't be there then.
Play the guitar.
One thing I was going to point out is I didn't realize this until I went on the ride along with the Meals on Wheels. It's not so much about bringing them a meal; it's more about letting people stay in their own homes longer, because now you've got somebody to check on them every day. That the county or the volunteer or whoever shows up checks on that person to make sure they're doing okay. They're not.
And you have a system in place to call in case,
They
what
look
you're right,
forward.
Jeff. Exactly.
Yes.
So,
We had a 911 call just last week, and folks, emergency contacts who are living even in the Kansas City metro area. It's hard to get here every day to visit their parents, and so they depend on us to be those eyes as well.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's really important.
I would say, though, there's a couple of dogs that got my attention.
I bet. There are a couple.
So I have a couple questions, and I do appreciate everything you do, and I haven't gotten to do my visit this time because I don't know, we had a special meeting or something.
We got you on the books.
Yeah, I'm going to go do it soon, and I do appreciate everything you've done. On your budget, under personnel services, adopted 2023 budget is $1,810,262. So that should be about $150,855 per month. Is that what you're showing?
Yes.
Okay. When I looked at the expenditures to date, it looks like it's about $486,394, and that would average out to be about $97,000. So it's coming in a little below. Do you expect that to continue for the rest of the year? Because if it does, that looks like a place where we'll be able to make some budget. They'll have a little working room in the budget.
Yeah. So this year, we had some unexpected funds that were received from the state of Kansas that we were able to go back and capture some of that personnel. Those were one-time monies. I think I was just here the other day and told you about $63,000 that was coming as unexpected funds from the state to offset a shortfall. So we used that for personnel, which is creating a little bit of a gap there in unexpected personnel funds that we're going to have this budget year.
Okay, so that
That's
will
one-time
create a carryover. If I'm adding it up right, instead of the 18, it'll be around $1,070,000. Is what I'm adding up.
Yes, a little bit of a carryover there.
So about
because of those funds.
$800,000. Is that right? Am I reading that right?
I think, Commissioner, one thing we need to look at is on the personnel services line item, they're proposing only $19,000 increase overall, and that includes the 4% increase for employees. So next year's budget without the 4% increase actually went down in the personnel services. So I don't think. And then
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out.
Yeah, as far
What-
as carryover goes, that would be nearly a 40%. What you're saying, if they only spend $1 million, that'd be about a 40%.
Well, if I'm just going by what the expenditures are to date, that's that. If it trends the same way it's not.
See expenditures today. Okay.
Yeah, I have that. It's
He asked for a year-to-date budget report.
so it's 486,394 is year to date.
But
Which-
part of that personnel is even in the grants, which she does as a reimbursement. We paid at 63.
And the only reason I'm asking is to see if there's going to be carryover.
But you need to be careful with trying to depend on, Mike, with some of those things to help in other areas because it may bite you in the rear end the following year. And
Yeah,
then you look at increases instead of being able to.
Well, I know, but we're working on this year's budget, so I'm trying to figure out if I got my facts right here. That's.
Yeah, I think because of the opening of different positions throughout the year, there's always a little bit of carryover in personnel. And then we did receive those one-time funds, but it really is going to work out pretty close to what we've anticipated for our 2023 budget.
Question to Jen, but when those are there, those move into the general fund if there's any carryover to help offset potential needs in other areas? No, I just am.
No. Council on Aging would move, their carryover would go into lowering the levy the following year. But her carryover would be consistent in staying within the Council on Aging fund.
Okay.
And are you fully staffed at this time? You are?
We have 3 openings right now due to retirement and resignation that will be filling at the end of this month.
So it'll
We'll be
a
fully
month
staffed.
Without being filled. Hopefully you can fill them within a month.
Yes, they'll be filled.
Okay.
2 of the 3 are filled
And
now.
that's
Yes.
pretty much every department. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be everybody stayed on the job, but now it seems like
If
my,
we.
my staff ranges in age from 20 to 86, with the majority of them being 60 and over. So we'll have attrition. We'll be dealing with significant attrition in the next
Yeah.
we're dealing
5 years.
Well, and the reason I'm kind of asking this is because
Thank you, Doug.
on there too.
each department's kind of been trying to keep down to 4%, and your department is 14%. So if we have any extra carryover, we're going to be looking for where we can.
Connie, I don't think, as I understand Mike correctly, and forgive me, Mike, you're not the only budget. Sometimes
Right.
carryover can be pretty healthy, and that keeps us, because we counted on that last year as we went down one of the mills. So we're looking to see if there's any other place, not just yours, but there's any place
All of
else.
the departments.
But I see, the only thing I see here is on that lease, and that's just part of doing business.
Yeah, and probably kick myself for this later, but where I have a $50,000 payment to my equipment reserve,
I saw that.
the $62,000 that I just asked for, or just told you that we were receiving from the state of Kansas, we paid that down into our equipment reserve to offset lease payments. So we'll have that $62,000 in our equipment reserve, which would offset this 50 that I was adding.
Okay.
That would be a place to
If we should, yeah.
remove if we need to.
Yeah, if the body wanted to.
There's a line item called miscellaneous.
There is.
What is that?
We've used that for a variety of things. As I mentioned before, the rest of the budget is pretty tight. If we needed to purchase a piece of equipment for a chore program, add something for one of our other programs, we had that line item. We used it to offset costs to replace uniforms when we rebranded last year. If it's not needed, it's not used.
Yeah. And you couldn't put a line item for everything that you do, Militia. I mean, Ms. Lanning, that'd be unbelievable, so I get it.
Unexpected expenses
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
didn't budget for.
And on the meals, it looks to me like you're going to break even on the meals with what the fee is right now. Is that what you're looking at?
Well, we're looking at from 23 to 24.
Yeah.
We're looking at about a $49,000 increase.
Well, but
accounting for that.
But if we get that, if that's budgeted, you'll break even on the
Yes.
meals.
Mhm. There's an increase for volunteer recognition. There's an increase in volunteers. We try and serve them lunch during
Absolutely.
the year.
I'm good with that.
Yep. Basically, to provide the same level of service you provided in 2023 for 2024, you can't remain revenue neutral.
It's tricky.
So you have to do something different if you were to remain revenue neutral. So,
I think the need for the services continues to expand. Connie's
I do
quarterly
too.
report, every quarterly report, when she comes in, it's record numbers.
I've noticed that, yeah, you're
Not
right.
just on Meals on Wheels, but other activities.
Right.
Yeah.
Just
Got a
people
nice
participating
It
in.
reminded me, I think it was, I want to say 50%, but I think it's more than that actually. How many people who are on Meals on Wheels that's their only?
Yeah. Right about 60%, and about 40% of them aren't able to pay the $2 per meal. And that's the need for the fundraising
Right.
and working with other organizations throughout Leavenworth to offset that cost. So
Yeah.
we brought in an additional $100,000 in grants and donations and things last year that wasn't budgeted to offset some of that cost.
Yeah. Okay.
It looks like the vehicle lease part was the part that really made you struggle with your budget.
Yeah, and it came in, all at once. Like I said, because that's when the vehicles were available and the need to not be able to see through the floorboards. Or
Yeah.
That was
I'll
bad
never
on the
forget
county.
Getting into one of the council on aging things.
County
Yeah, I remember
commission
those things, yeah.
not replacing them vehicles. That was all
Catches up with you.
caught up with us.
Deferred maintenance always does.
It wasn't deferred maintenance, it was just replacement.
Well, yeah, and then,
Deferred
when
replacement.
you take the vehicles that everybody else has used up because they have no more useful.
Right.
But they're free.
You get an antique tag for them.
But they're free.
Yeah, careful what you
That's
ask.
when Aaron comes in, don't bring that.
Okay.
I'm good.
Does anybody have any more
Yep.
questions
Nope.
for Connie?
No.
I'm sure that we'll come up with some more, but
Thank you, Connie.
thank you.
thanks
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Thanks, Connie.
Appreciate it.
Sometimes you can't afford free.
We just move on to our clerks.
But there is no free.
Yeah, it's my turn now. First budget I'll talk about is the county clerk. There's less than a 4% increase in the county clerk's budget. In fact, some of it even decreased. For instance, the Senate Bill 13 expenses. I did not know what to anticipate when I did the
Yeah.
23 budget because, we did it before we were even doing the mailing. And so that comes in at about $25,000. The thing with 2024 is the county will be responsible for the total costs, or for sending out the Senate Bill 13 notices. So there won't be a reimbursement of that cost coming in from the state. Other
That could
than
be
that, it's
considered an
real
unfunded
status
State
quo.
unfunded mandate.
Does anyone have any
People don't care.
questions on the clerk side?
I don't, I looked through it.
I mean,
You got it at 4%.
yeah,
Another-
less than
4%.
4%.
Yeah.
Just
That
another-
number, Mike.
Just another unfunded mandate by the state that we gotta pay.
Now, the election's another story. That certainly came in at more than 4% because 2024 is the next presidential election. With any election budget throughout the state, you have lesser years and then, the next year, the even-numbered years. the cost doubles for putting on the election. I'm hoping we can even do it for the amount that I budgeted, truthfully. I went entirely by actuals that were spent in 22. For instance, in 22, for the primary election, it was an actual expense of $76,728. And so I did budget $85,000 because we do expect even a greater turnout than we saw in 22. I've already heard that both parties are going to push advance. They're going to push whether it's advance in person or advance being mailed. And so the county picks up that cost, all the mailing cost, all the personnel cost involved in having advance. In each of the even number years, we reach out to Basehor and Tonganoxie and hold advance voting options for folks down there. We'll have a presidential primary on March the 19th of next year, so we had to budget for that. We do expect to be reimbursed by the state, so I did show a reimbursement cost of that primary in my revenue.
Are you going to have additional staff if we have to send out all the revenue neutral notices about the same time you're going to have a primary next year in 2024?
I always budget for additional IOC people. And I'm going to be honest with you, I expect next year to be a hard year. I think having the elections, I think a lot of the controversy around elections, the questions that come in from different voters each year gets more and more difficult. And so I do. I will
have so much full-time
have
staff.
Additional folks that are necessary. And the thing with election workers, and especially doing 3 elections, if you pay over $1,500 to someone, they go on the personnel side. I can't just, pay them. They have to, there's the IRS regulations that we sign them up as personnel. And so you will see an increase there, but it is IOC employees. And I know it sounds bad, but it is what it is. And when the counties are responsible for holding the elections, we're also responsible for the total cost of holding those elections.
I had a question. If you went to total hand count, no machines, would that increase your cost of the elections?
Absolutely.
Was that a rhetorical question?
Well, I just wondered what percent.
It would decrease the accuracy. Because as each of you have seen in the audits that we do each year, our accuracy rate is at 100% with those machines compared to the hand count. And so I'm very confident on the equipment that we use, and I'm very confident of the election workers that we hire and our IOC people.
Well, every time we've done an audit, they've always turned out 100%.
Yes.
They have. But we do a lot of testing and a lot of logic and accuracy testing, actually, on each one of the machines that go out. We don't just program that machine and send it out. We run the ballots through it. We run test elections through them to make sure that Leavenworth County does have a 100% accuracy on our equipment. Nothing is taken for granted. I know Vicki has helped in the election office sometimes, and many of the people that we hire, they'll come in and say, we had absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
Because it is months and months of preparation to put an election on. Connie talked about for a second the a transfer. I put a transfer into equipment reserve of $25,000. The reason I do that each year is at the end of 10 years when we will have to get new equipment, the county will not have that total $700,000, say, cost. That part of that will be put into equipment reserve so that it will help the year that new equipment is necessary in the county.
Everything needs to be on an amortization schedule. That was the last time the county had a mill increase was for that roof for the Justice Center, because they did not have it on depreciation or an amortization schedule. Luckily, it's before we were all here.
Another budget that is maintained in the clerk's office is the clerk tech fund. We receive about, last year I think we received $21,000 or $22,000 from some filings through the Register of Deeds office. I do try to use that for, say, some maintenance on the equipment, or I can use it for helping send out some of the mailing for the RNR or the tax statements. But the $20,000, we do use that. I'll use it sometimes for training, but it's not a lot of money that I can depend upon to help with either the clerk or the election budget. Our bond and interest funds, we have budgeted exactly what our payments are. As you notice, sometimes at the end of the year we have to amend that fund. And the reason we have to amend it is if, say, there's one of our bonds that, like we refinance that one year for a savings into the future. So we'll have to amend that occasionally because of that. But it's not because of an additional cost associated with it, other than when we redo those finances on that.
Bond and interest, all those bonds are paid for out of the sales tax, so they're not a levy bond.
Right.
There's cost, and the cost is covered by the sales tax, so it reduces what we have available for current projects.
Right.
But the last one that we did refinance was a big savings for the county.
Yeah. I remember.
And that is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a very good time. Does anyone have any other questions?
Well, thank you for being so tight with your budget.
Oh, well, it does, I hate to see that much of an increase, but
It is what it is
I
on
just
that
know
one.
it's necessary. I know
You gotta
when
election.
you add
Yep.
another election.
Well, we have, adding that new primary that we've never had before for the presidential primary is going to.
Big,
Yep.
it's a big cost.
And like the narrative says, the largest expense is the requirement for the state unfunded mandate, the revenue neutral notices being sent out to each property owner.
Yep.
So again, the state causes half of our problem.
Half?
That
Maybe.
was
You're
vetoed
moving
by the
to-
governor, by the way. That there was monies appropriated, but it was vetoed.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest part of all those was the election fund.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
mandated.
Yeah.
It's not optional.
Yeah. Primary, yeah, that's all has to be done.
And so, that's the thing that I think that you need to look at in a lot lot of these budgets. It's not discretionary spending. The election is not discretionary.
Exactly my point.
That's the biggest part of what the clerk has to spend
Yep.
on those years. And almost every year, that's the largest part.
We agreed.
It's not discretionary.
Right, we don't get to.
Yeah, it's not a choice.
The election is canceled.
Well, sometimes we like to do that. We're not allowed.
Hey, John, you want to write that down with Mike? I'm good.
All right, well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Janet.
We have about 9 minutes before Larry's on the schedule. He's here, so if anybody wants to grab
I'm going to get a cup of coffee.
Yeah, best I've seen you move in decades, brother.
You ready to go again?
Here we go.
Mr. Marlboro for information systems.
Good
Let's go.
morning. I'm not sure how you want to approach this.
Tell us about your budget.
Know that much for sure.
Well, I see a minus 5%, so you're already on a good start on one part of this budget.
Correct. It is 5%.
See, Mike,
Dues.
let's pass forward.
However, you may want to discuss, at the very minimum, the capital outlay request that I have in there for $32,000. That was for Fortinac. It's network access control. I don't want to bore you with technobabble or buzzwords, but basically it's a system that lets us control what devices get on our network. Flat refuses to allow certain things on the network. So it's kind of like having a nice little padlock on every network port in the county. So it will allow us to control better than we've ever been able to before unauthorized devices that try to get on the network, or devices that fall out of compliance with their antivirus software, for instance. It gets out of date. It wouldn't be allowed to get network access. So it's a good perimeter defense to help defend the network and the devices on the county from a rogue device that's some vendor shows up or some body's trying to get in. It says no. So I put it in here because I believe it's a good security measure. However, I also view it as low-hanging fruit. If you decided 5% overall reduction wasn't sufficient, I figured that might be the first place you would start looking. So I guess my question to the commission is, what is your appetite for continued enhancements to our network security?
Well, let me ask you something, if I could, Madam Chair. What we have in place that we've been adding the last couple of years has been doing a lot of this stuff too, though, hasn't it? I mean, haven't we been protecting the things with the upgrades and everything we've been doing, Larry?
Yes, but not this particular style. We've never had this kind of capability.
Okay.
This would be a new feature that we've just never had. We have antivirus software. We have firewalls. You know, we did replace 2 new firewalls last year.
That's what I recall.
They do a wonderful job of protecting from the internet, and they support the VPN connections and all of that. This level of security device we've never had. So this would be an entirely new approach to one other facet. Cybersecurity is impossible. Whatever you do, you spend all the money in the world, somebody's going to find something,
Figure a way to do it,
new way
yeah.
to try to
Yeah,
get
sure.
in. It's like criminals, right?
It's ongoing battle.
But it enhances our capabilities.
But it does. It's one more wall that they have to clear to potentially hack us. It's another step toward hardening our environment. We'll never achieve perfect.
Right.
We could spend all the money you want, and we'd still be vulnerable in some way, somehow.
You know, it's changing all the time. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
This is
Well,
way
we
cheaper than
have
the last
a-
ransomware I saw.
$1 million
Some county payout.
hit.
This is way cheaper than the last ransomware payment
Right.
I saw county pay.
Right, that's why I said there's,
I don't think it's a want, I think it's a need.
and when we were at that conference last fall, I went to that one seminar, and they were really discussing enhancing and improving cybersecurity and how important that is. So,
So-
but that's,
Yes, sir.
If we didn't put that in, are we, I mean, obviously on a spectrum, you're always wanting to get safer and safer and safer. But if we delayed that expenditure for a year, are we jeopardizing ourselves, or are we probably going to be fine?
Well, no more so than we have the last year.
Right.
Because we've never done this. So
I mean, the budget, we're really
I know
tight
you're
budget.
looking. That's why I figured this would
Yeah.
be the first topic. But look at it maybe this way. With the systems that I mentioned to Commissioner Smith, we have antivirus and all this, so that's to protect us from a malicious device. This particular feature would allow us to keep the malicious device from even being able to talk and test the antivirus. If it can't get on the network, it
So
can't
that it
attack
can
the
get
other
in.
devices.
I'm 100% for it. It's
So it's
just
distancing
that,
the
you know,
product.
if,
But, the thing is if, it's that, it may or may not happen, but it happened to Wyandotte. It cost them $1 million out of an unexpected,
I get it, but you can never totally protect yourself. And you've got
Right.
to work it within the budget.
Yep.
So it's going to have to be looked at.
That's correct. I'm just being proactive by presenting this. I thought maybe this would be an opportunity to do it because I had other reductions. So I'm just putting it out there.
Right.
But I certainly understand if the appetite's not present now. But I think this would be a good thing, so that's why I put it in there. It's your unenviable position to decide whether or not to fund it.
I think it is really important because I am already getting emails about election.
About that too. I was going to bring
That's
that
what
up.
I'm worried about in
So
2024 is the
when
election.
I had saw this in there, it's something that not just myself, but you as a board can let the public know that we're doing everything to make sure that the elections are safe and secure. And so, and I understand, Mike's point on wait a year or whatever, but like I said, I am already.
And I'm
getting
for
emails.
it. It's just where we're going to find it. So,
Absolutely. And
My
then,
concern is, it is the big election year next
it
year.
is.
That's my concern.
we have done without it all these years previous, though, like to his point. Yes, it's an issue of risk management. Is it worth the risk? That's the decision everybody has to make.
Well, until we get the numbers back from Mark and where we're at, I think it's a great idea. Don't get me wrong. I just have to get through the rest of the budget, see where we're at on the mill. That's important. At the same time, point is very clear to me about next year's election and what that's going to be. I think that's going to be something else.
I don't want to be in the paper.
Neither do we. Not for that reason, anyway.
Exactly what happened to Wyandotte County.
Right.
I've never been able to get any details on that, which I find odd.
Well, if you got hacked, would you want to put out there why and how?
Usually you don't want to, but yet everybody finds out anyway. It ends up showing up on a website somewhere. But I haven't found any
Hope
real
they've kept
details
that.
of what exactly happened to them or the scope. But it was ugly. We all know that because of the time frame. I think they still have some fallout from that. So it was obviously a very big deal.
Yeah.
I just don't know the extent.
Okay.
But there's that item. Some other potential savings that are in here regarding POTS lines. We have $20,000 that's in this budget because of POTS lines that are related to the 911 calls from remote county facilities. I've been trying to work with Spectrum for months now to remove the need for these POTS lines because they're getting ridiculously expensive. AT&T increased the fee 30% in January. They'll probably do it again next year. They want people to stop having these POTS lines. They're traditional old analog lines like you may have had in your house 40 years ago or
Right.
100 years ago. I want to get rid of those because they're costing us $20,000. Now, I left the funds in the budget request because I've not been successful at getting rid of them yet. But I fully expect to have success. But until you do,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I expect to not need that $20,000 next year. Do you want to cut it and hope that I have success with Spectrum? I got 6 more months.
I don't think we can do that
I
yet.
thought I'd be done in
Mark.
March, and here we are in June,
Yeah.
and it just drags on. So
I don't think we can do it until you
I
know
don't
for
think
sure.
the end is still
Till you're
full
done.
cash
Right.
basis law.
Right, that's
Yeah.
it.
I
That's
think
the
it's
problem.
got to stay until you come back with that good news.
And I am general fund, so if I do get the success I expect, it's not like I just don't spend it and it stays right where it.
And then your 32,000 turns into 12.
Yeah.
Well, you could look at it
Very
that way,
quickly.
yeah. it'd just be 20,000 still left in general fund 2024. So it's provisioned in here, but I don't expect to need it. Is there any other high points in my relatively simple budget that the commission would like to discuss?
Well, because you were very
I didn't see
detailed
any.
in your,
Presentation.
yeah, I mean,
But we didn't get a joke out of you. That's the one bad thing.
When I'm in this room, I somehow lose all my humor. That's a joke, right? Does that count?
That counts.
No, that we understand.
The truth is funnier than fiction.
I'm good.
Well, thank you.
All right, well, I guess, thank you. Anything else?
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Larry.
thank you, Larry.
Is that our schedule?
Any corrections next?
10:15. Now we're doing pretty good. Take another break.
What time you schedule them to come? Mark?
What's that?
10:15.
2:15, yeah.
Turn the camera off.
Yeah, this time. We can go ahead and start even though we're a little early, I think.
Yeah.
We can begin. Go ahead, Jamie. Now we're doing community corrections, juvenile services. And
You have extra time to give a long speech.
I feel like this is pretty straightforward.
It is.
This year we're asking the same amount of money as last year.
Yeah.
So,
First thing I caught.
yes. This year we did adjust the rate of overtime for intake calls, but our personnel and benefit costs stayed relatively the same. I'm just tweaking the percentages that come out of the county funding so we can remain, as close as possible to last year's budget for those amounts. And right now, Misty and David are both working with Wyandotte County to update our JDC contract with WICO. Haven't heard one way or the other on whether the contracted rate will stay the same, but I'm hoping with the amount of Wyandotte County employees that work here now, they're not going to raise the rates. So hopefully they will do us all some favors and keep us at $150 a day. We're doing pretty good right now. So I think that is a solid amount so far, but otherwise just the same amount as last year, $383,396. No increase.
I like it.
Yeah, that was a sharp pencil you had.
Thanks. I don't think HR is going to like all the changes to our funding formulas because a lot of us come out of 5 different funds.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But we do what we can to put those costs back into our grants. So
I had a general question. We've kind of talked about it, and you guys probably know, and I probably don't, but they've been talking about how the discrepancy is of how counties out in western Kansas are funding compared to the method we're getting funded by. Can you kind of explain that to me a little? In general?
yes. So am I being live streamed? Is this recorded?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have a worksheet that I feel is pretty self-explainable. It breaks it down. I think that does anything. It demonstrates all the discrepancies and disparities across funding of all of the agencies pretty well, better than I can do it verbally. But there's no sense making.
So if you're a western Kansas county, you're getting funded disproportionate to a larger eastern Kansas county.
We're also being funding disproportionately, astronomically, and according to some of the directors who've been doing this longer than I've been alive, Reno County and Leavenworth County have long been people who are getting drops in the bucket comparative to other agencies of our size. It doesn't make sense when there are people who have 50 people on probation when we have sometimes 158 active cases. And they're getting $90,000 more than us for behavioral health funding, or they're getting $100,000 or $200,000 more than us in base funding. Help me understand that.
And is this something the legislators are going to have to change, or is this a administrative regulation could change it? Like, could the governor just change this, or would it have to be legislation through the state?
I'm not sure. Last year, to get things done, we had to use our lobbyist, Stuart Little, to get, that's his real name, Little Big Government, and he had to lobby and work with the Senate and Ways Committee and some other legislators to get support for us to have the funding so that we could either adopt the OJA pay scale or be competitive with their pay matrix. And the funding and how people use that is still up to each advisory board and board of county commissioners, whether we adopted this pay scale or we decided to stay on our own to stay competitive and be flexible. But this year they asked for us to get the same amount of positions, because when they got raises back in FY21, they also got 70 additional positions. And just this last year, we got 5 new judges. Well, more than that, but we got 1 new judge here. And they're seeing an increase in support from the state for those positions, and they do remain state employees, all OJA. But they're not giving us that same support, although we have extremely high caseloads. And there are some agencies, when they work closer with court services, that are being told, don't give community corrections bond supervision, don't give them IIP. The state gave us positions, and we need to hold on to everything because their caseloads are growing, but we don't want to give up positions and then have the state go back in and pad their budget to give them positions. So there's this constant power struggle, and we control the influx of bed space at KDOC. It's very difficult to get revoked and sent back to prison from parole. You basically have to commit a new crime. On community corrections, you are already sentenced to a minimum of 12 months in KDOC, and you can mess up and have technical violations and be revoked to prison or, commit a new crime. There's a hierarchy of closure. For every closure that we send them that they think could have stayed here, they can ding us for funding, and they'll ding people, and how they do it also doesn't make sense, because there are some agencies, if you don't meet the state goal of 75% success, they'll lose 3% of their funding. But then there are some agencies who never meet that, and they're not losing 3% every year because they're costing the state bed.
This sounds like the school finance formula.
Well, but it's also it's all through the Department of Corrections, correct?
Right. We're like weird stepchildren under their umbrella. And how they fund us is not just an equation that you or I or Mark or David or Janet even could put into an equation and come close to estimating, well, it looks like because we have these people, boss, we're going to get the X amount of money. It doesn't work like that. It's 2 pages. It's very subjective. And when we ask for how they calculate it, and Mark has asked me to get those numbers, we are not being provided with that information.
So there's nothing the legislature could do on that, really. I mean, if they're running it through the Department of Corrections, unless they pass a law saying
revoke that, or
it's going to be based on population or something, the funding.
Right. And population is something that people can tweak. So if you leave a case open, KDOC would think, okay, Doug Smith's still on probation because somebody didn't go in there and close it out and say Doug already went to prison. Doug successfully completed probation.
Don't we have a couple local legislators that are on the corrections
John Doe
committee?
I think so.
I mean, that's something they could be working on.
And we think the funding system is broke. It doesn't make sense, again, that smaller caseload communities receive more money. I mean, not even the same, but more money. Or the much smaller receive almost as much. So the system's broke. The solution, I believe that the KDOC has the ability to fix it without legislative
Intervention.
Oh, you do?
That they
intervention.
just,
But I don't know that they will.
right.
So it may require legislative intervention to get it fixed. But it's frustrating. But to be fair, I guess, that we also don't fund currently at the level that they would like for us to fund it at. And I know that we think that we should get more money from the state, and I think we should, and I think other agencies probably should receive less. But there are also agencies that, like, you're being asked to consider to budget money for these services. Plus, we provide the building and everything else. There are other agencies that don't, other counties that don't put a dime into it.
That's
A
correct.
lot more than do. More counties don't put any money in. So I think that's also some of the
Which is required.
KDOCs. Yeah, they're if they would start enforcing some of that,
Right.
they would have more of their own funds, and it's just broke. And I don't understand why. I don't know if it's political or what it is, but I don't want to. I don't want to create more problems for us by
Right.
belittling anybody or criticizing them for the job that they do. They're just working with what they've been given.
Right.
So the folks we deal with directly, this is what they've been given. This is, they don't set the policy or the rules. They just have to follow them. So the change has to come at the very highest level to make anything happen. And that's where the problem is right now.
Yeah.
But this is a good budget.
Yeah.
And for agencies that have tried to sue them, I know Riley County, Cherokee, and Labette also sued KDOC. It did not work out in their favor. And I do think, back to what Mark said, anytime we bring up funding issues, they slide those statutes in front of us
They're
going to enforce them.
right.
But it's like, playing chess.
Right. Well, I appreciate the work you're doing.
Yep, me too.
We all do. Thank you.
Trying to keep people here and working. It's a tough labor market out there.
Yeah, it is. Very much so.
Any questions?
I'm good.
No questions.
Thanks for that explanation. And I think that's something, I don't know who needs to work on that, but somebody does.
Well, they're looking at changing funding formulas on the juvenile side now, and there are 24 dual agencies in the state. And we believe that, obviously it makes more financial sense for you to have all of your adult and juvenile corrections in the same pot, because then you're saving on administrative costs. But it seems, how they fund it is dependent on a lot of those single agencies that are out there, because if they changed how they're doing it, like the base fee that they give each county or each jurisdiction for administrative fees is so that these smaller agencies, can survive if they're only juvenile or only adult. So,
Right.
I think getting some of the other counties to understand how we would benefit from consolidation, could help all the rest of us, because right now, that's one of the funding considerations for all of these formula changes that they're proposing. So,
You interact with the schools very much.
Teresa Carroll was our major contact, or Kim Knight. But otherwise, and Amy Sloan from USD 453, and then sometimes we talk to Aaron Yoakum.
We know him.
And Nick Flynn.
But we do have some of the grant,
Yeah.
a grant that
The
allows
prevention
for
funds.
the prevention funds that allows for some communication, but,
It's limited to grants.
right.
Here's what we can provide the schools. So,
I'll get you the new contact information for the person that's replacing Kim
okay. I appreciate
on
it.
all of the kind of outreach stuff.
Would you mind sending me that document you talked about?
Yes.
Thanks.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Road and, nope.
Planning and zoning.
Planning and zoning.
Come on down, John.
Get thrown to the wolves early on in your career here.
Who are the wolves?
Well, this budget's pretty straightforward. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward.
We haven't asked for anything outside of the increase in contractual obligation, which is a pre-programmed number. As you've heard today earlier, there is a function of fleet cost that happens there. We've held the line.
I saw that, yeah.
Engineering services, and likely won't expend that number, but we won't know until the end of the year. There is an increase in personnel services. That is market rate adjustments. We've had one position that's been open since the beginning of March, advertised, and got a total of 3 interviews out of that. We're rotating that position to fill it as a temporary intern position. And we'll advertise full-time again once our intern goes back to school in late summer. But likely, it's probably not going to be at the previously advertised cost. Obviously, that wasn't sitting well in the market. So we're going to have to raise that a little bit to fill the position. And with that, I would ask if you have any questions over the line items.
Just a vehicle lease again.
That's self-explanatory.
Yeah, that we're going through with everybody else, yeah.
We can, but let's talk about that for a second. Currently, Planning and Zoning has 2 vehicles. Talking with Mark, and I agree, there is no need for 2 in this particular department. I think we can rotate that down to 1, and I think we're going to be able to save on that program cost from $17,000 down to about $8,800. Considerable reduction in that particular line item.
Are your vehicles new, John?
I'm sorry.
Are your vehicles new?
Well,
They're part of the lease.
they're part of the lease program. There.
Yeah, I know, but if you reduce down to 1, we're not going to have any.
It'll be
Okay.
1 new vehicle.
Okay,
Right.
gotcha.
Is that pretty much a done deal that's going to happen?
Again, we're not part of that fleet process, but yes, as I understand it, it
Yes.
is.
We've talked about it.
Okay, good. Good. Well, I don't have anything.
Yeah, that 8841 from what I understand.
Yeah. And then came with
Keep
the
it flat.
sticker.
I'm good.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
Well, now we're ahead of schedule.
Now let's get ready.
We can start.
Do we want to go ahead and start? I'm just making sure since we have a
With-
public.
Yeah, with,
The schedule's internal only.
Okay.
That's our schedule, so we can move.
All right, cool. Yay.
We already-
Another break?
okay.
Okay. Let's do GIS first. So the GIS is within the general fund. If you look at historical trends in personal services, the personnel in that department, you do see an increase in costs over the course of the last several years. This department had been transferred from planning and zoning under my direction in public works. At that time, there was an employee in public works that we ended up transferring some of that. His responsibilities had to do a lot with mapping, and so we moved him into that public works role and had been carrying that personnel services inside of the public works department. But as he is located and works in GIS, we had moved that line item for that employee over. Other than that, there are some slight increases in the cost of the web mapping annual maintenance agreement. It went up approximately $6,500. Beyond that, those 2 line items, everything else remained within the same general scope of costs. Be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
How many employees do you have there?
4 total.
4.
Let me follow that up with that GIS department actually works for 12, 13 different offices. So they do GIS mapping for the appraiser's office, planning and zoning, Public Works, Sheriff's Department, Clerk's Office. So
Everybody, yeah.
those 4 employees actually work for almost every department in the county.
Yeah, Register of Deeds, County Attorney's Office, we produce maps for their cases. There's specific tasks assigned to different employees to work on, whether it's Register of Deeds, inputting the parcel data, or traffic counts and traffic count mapping and accident mapping. It's done by one employee, so each employee kind of has different departments he or she works with more often than others, but they do interact with about every department in the county.
Questions on GIS?
No.
We'll go to noxious weed.
We'll talk about that. So, noxious weed. Noxious weed, the personnel services has a fairly small reduction based upon, or not reduction, fairly small increase based upon 2023 to 2024 projected numbers. That is reflected upon some projected overtime costs from last year. Generally, since there was a mid-year increase for inflation, and then the projected 4%. Expect to see a 10% increase in those costs, but it did not occur in that department. Once again, we see the vehicle lease payments making a substantial change. Obviously, $7,800 for the type of equipment that they operate out there is not a proper depreciation schedule that had been utilized in the past with deferred maintenance and deferred replacement of those. The costs are now coming due. As you guys know, chemicals have gone way up in cost. Every bottle of chemical that we do sell is a 25% cost to the county, based on the unfunded state mandate, as Commissioner Culberson refers to often. As these chemicals have skyrocketed in price over the course of the last couple of years, the amount of sales we have seen have gone down. We are only asking for a $20,000 increase, which is less than 10%. But many of these chemicals we've seen go up in cost of 100%, 150%. But the amount that they had been selling has been reduced because the public's just not buying as much chemical as they had been prior to those cost increase. Whether that trend will stay true or whether people will be playing catch up because they have not been spraying their properties as much as they did in the past, and they'll need to do that. That's the kind of the variable cost in this. It is a bit of a gamble, but I think it's a relatively safe one. Every year we do. I think last year we ended this budget with approximately $10,000, so there was no carryovers. This is not a cash-rich budget by any means, and I don't anticipate this year or next year being any different.
Okay.
So these guys do, part of that overtime cost, they do pull some of these guys over into snow removal. We did not anticipate. We don't know what kind of storm events we're going to have, but Noxious Weed does help out in the storm event situations with their employees, since they're all out there at the shop. And we had projected another mild winter.
Well, a large El Nino, though, is forming, so you never know.
You never know. We get another. We're due at some point to get some big snow.
Put those vibes out there.
So is that, do you want that? Is that what you want? A lot of snow?
No.
It sounded like you wanted a lot of snow.
No, I would just assume have year round in the 80s.
So
Would suit me
equipment.
fine.
Equipment within noxious weed, just like all the other equipment, has been slow coming, but we have been able to get it. Sprayers, I think, are all back in stock if we needed to replace one or had any issues. The trucks are on a lease program.
There's the
Frank's
cost.
done a good job of that. We provided all those numbers. I do have the spreadsheets here today if we needed them, but we break down all of the departments' exact costs and track everything by department. So I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. Over 100 vehicles, obviously, county-wide that we do track within Public Works. And so we have not replaced any vehicles that were not already in the fleet. I think that's an important thing to remember is as we've gone into the leasing from straight ownership, we have not replaced any. And as we are able to now electronically access these vehicles, we can better account for what miles are being driven. And if some departments, as John alluded to, can see a reduction in vehicles, we will work with Mark to do that. So I think that was the goal of the program, is to get our existing fleet updated and then make an analysis of is there anywhere that need more vehicles or need less vehicles.
I think that was, it was hard to evaluate it, the number of vehicles required, because we had to have so many backup vehicles because the ones that were broke down all the time. So now that we've gotten the fleet updated, we're trying to get right-sized with the fleet. And actually, the position that we're using for the fleet management was one that we converted from the shop. It was a shop position because with the new vehicles, we didn't need that position for that, and we use it for fleet, and it has helped tremendously with not just tracking where we're at with our vehicles, but keeping up on our maintenance, and then also the cameras and the GPS and everything else that he's had to monitor.
Yeah, that system is, so you have a credit card number linked to the GPS number, to the VIN number, to the, everything has to be, all the serial numbers have to be, so you got about 6 numbers that you have to have in the system working at all times for the system to function correctly. And then obviously you have wiring harnesses for each one of these different pieces of equipment that we have to purchase and make sure that everything's online and get them all wired up. And we have a guy at the shop that Frank works with, but we also work on the procurement of all the different equipment in the county for the transfer station, for auxiliary services and Public Works. And so we put out all the bid documents for those procurements pretty much.
It's also important, what Frank does also, because he has even helped the clerk's office in the fact that all accidents go through one person now, which is so helpful when it comes to the insurance, and so nothing falls through the cracks there. And these numbers that you see in the lease purchases are actual numbers that Frank came up with. The department did not come up with those. Frank did, and we assigned that to each budget, so it was not a number just taken out of the air to put inside their budgets.
So we do have spreadsheets that has every department broke down by vehicle type, cost. It shows the cost of the GPS rentals, the monthly fees, everything that has to do with each vehicle, and identifying everything that we provided to every department, so they're aware of their own fleet. The clerk's office has it, Mark has it, and so everyone has the copy of the entire spreadsheet. If anybody has any questions about it, we can produce that information very easily.
Just fleet management and running your fleet efficient. I mean, when I first got here, the county commissioners had a car. It was a 2005. It had less than 30,000 miles on it.
It was the best car in the county.
Yeah. Well kept, I guess.
Flat spots on the tires.
It had the original tires on it.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, it had less than 30,000 miles on it.
Would the chairman drive that?
No, if you went to a conference or something, you drove it.
You got to do better usage of that vehicle.
Every time you wanted to go drive it, you had to go put a battery or something. Jump started there, the tires. So they did not need that vehicle.
And I know that we're a little off of noxious weeds, obviously. So
I do have a question.
Yeah, I was going to say you have questions on noxious weeds.
I have a question on the mill. It said, can you kind of give me the that passed, or it used to be funded through a standalone mill levy, and when did that transition, or what's the history of that?
The state statute.
So there's a state statute. I don't know when it transitioned. That had been, I think, prior to my employment here. It probably happened a ways in the past. But the state statute has different mill levy funding requirements within it. And at a certain threshold, if you were to, I believe it's a little over 1 mil, if I'm not
1.5
mistaken.
or 1.4 mil.
Yeah, there's a certain amount
Didn't
of.
come out from under it?
If you offer over that in taxation, you're taxing the public at a higher rate for your noxious weed control. And you also, at that point, I believe the way I read the statute, you no longer have to offer the cost share, which seems counterproductive that you would tax at a higher rate and not offer the cost share program. I think it was a way to implement the requirement of the cost share program, is because no county is going to put $1.5 million aside or $1 million aside towards noxious weeds necessarily. And so I don't know when it transitioned. Maybe.
If we did what the state statute allowed us to do, it doubled this budget, basically.
It was recommended by our auditor many, many years ago that we combine several funds into general. Election used to be standalone, noxious weeds standalone. You can look at a lot of these that have the higher numbers. They were, even our appropriated funds were standalone, and so it was just recommended that we combine all of
Right.
these.
And you were out there at the shop. Has this ever? When did the noxious weed? Did it start like 30 years ago, or how long ago?
Noxious weed law?
Yeah.
Oh no, back in 1930 something.
Oh, so it's been around
Yeah,
a long time.
it's been an old statute.
So I just didn't know what the history of it was.
No, the history is we were more. The whole state was more ag. Noxious weed was taken over. No, I can go through the whole history of it with you. But it's pretty boring. But at the 1.4, I think, mil or whatever it is, I mean, that's for the smaller counties. We've definitely surpassed that many, many years ago.
That's probably counties with a very low valuation.
Yeah, that you can charge up to that. But that doesn't apply to us. We'd have a pretty impressive noxious weed department if we did that.
Well, thanks.
Okay, we're going to move on to Road and Bridge, local service.
This is the one we've been waiting for. At least I have.
Go with
So-
Road and Bridge.
Road and Bridge. So for personnel, we have the exact same. We're not asking for any adjustments this year. Like I previously stated, in 2023, we did move a member of the Public Works budget into the GIS budget. But overall, it is the same number of employees that we had previously had from 23 to 24. Obviously, you guys know we have a high rate of turnover out there. It has slowed a little bit over the course of the last 18 months or 2 years from the 2021 numbers where we had to replace 60 employees in a 6-month period. But it is still a fairly high rate of attrition and turnover. And so that reflects no change. It does reflect some overtime. As you move down through the budget, under contractual services, you will see that there is an increase in the bridge inspections, or the 225 costs. That is biannual bridge inspections. They're a state mandate. Those costs have increased historically as the requirements have increased. There was a major shift in requirements after the I-35 bridge collapse in Minnesota. But that $100,000 is kind of a mid-level cost. I believe the last time we paid for it, it was around $85,000 total cost with finish. We did reduce those costs down to around $60,000 with any turnip seed. But depending upon what service provider responds to our RFP. Some of them in the past have been as high as $140,000. So I think $100,000 is a safe number there. We did reduce $100,000 from the milling. We bought a mill head, the 48-inch mill head for the front of the skid loader. We had tried over the past 2 years to contact and get interest from contractors to jump from some bridges and just mill off the bridge approaches so they were smoother. We did not receive much interest from those. We did use that $100,000 to buy that mill head and get some work completed around and on the bridges. And so that line item has been removed. We're going to try to do some of that as maintenance with the county crews, and then we will re-explore that cost in the future as money permits.
How you going to have enough staff to be able to do that?
Not at a.
I mean, what are you shooting for? 10 bridges a year, 5 bridges a year?
I would think we would shoot for probably 5 bridges a year. We did a few bridges at the beginning of the asphalt season, and we'll probably do a few more in the fall after we're done with asphalt.
It takes a whole crew to do traffic control and set up.
Yep, and we have identified, so we had
hopefully Dempsey.
Yeah, a couple foremen go out. We identified about 30 bridges that have that ledge drop off patched up to the bridge. We identified them in 3 categories of basically ranking them 1 through 10 in each category to kind of get an idea of where we wanted to start when we were looking at trying to find a contractor to work with us on those. But that we're going to approach it from that same. We have the worst 10, kind of the middle 10, and then the 10 that we'll need to move into in the next 5 years. But it'll be something that we just, sometimes it's just getting started on these maintenance items, and if you never start, you'll never complete them. So
it'll be something
just as we have
right before you chip seal. If you got a bridge that's on a chip seal route, just do it right before you chip seal so you can get the asphalt sealed up.
Yeah, we're going to try to do it as we go through the county, just like that. Or if we have some in the fall that have gotten any worse, had settling or any type of issues at the bridge, just try to get them as we can. And maybe if we have a week where it rains all week or something, we have a real wet week where we can't get out and do some other things. That's something that they can do that's on the asphalt.
I was hoping you'd get a contractor to bid on that and get in there and knock some of them out.
A lot of mobilization.
It is.
And for no more work than it is, and it requires flaggers, whether we flag for them or they had provided their own flaggers. So I think it's something that everybody's had a lot of work. There's a lot of infrastructure dollars out there, and it's not a time where a lot of contractors are actively looking for jobs to keep their crews busy.
Are you fully staffed right now?
No, I believe we have 1 vacancy currently. Maybe we also are going to transition a guy up into a crew leader position, and so that we'll have 2 probably the next week. We were fully staffed about 3 weeks ago. So
it lasts long, did it?
No, it never lasts more than. It doesn't seem to ever last longer than 3 weeks or a month, but ever. But we go through a lot of turnover. We are registered as a CDL training facility, and so we do hire a lot of employees who don't have their CDLs, and we give them their CDLs, and then 6 to 9 to 12 months later, they move into another position because that allows them to get a higher wage. Within that contractual services, you do see the equipment, vehicle lease payments. That number, depending upon how both Mark and the board wants to address that, we could move additional equipment into that. We did lease the graders this last go around for the bids, and we bid out the 5-year balloon costs. We always try to come up with a way to require the company to bid that end-of-life cost into the bid, so we have that 5 years projected. They no longer do the 5-year buybacks. Some of them are offering 5-year trade-ins. So whatever way we can guarantee the life cycle cost of that equipment is what we're trying to do. And so through the leases, we do have a bid-in 5-year balloon payment if we wanted to own that machine outright after the 5-year cost. I can move on down unless anybody has any questions about the first section of contractual services. Hearing none, I'm going to move on in. So, road seal went up in cost 12%. Although we did 110 miles last year. This year we're projected to do approximately 115. We did not raise that by the 12% because we did have some funding available from last year, but we do need to continue to increase that with the cost of inflation or reduce the service miles that we're providing each year. Obviously, we did finish with one of the lowest carryovers historically. I believe we had like $115,000 left in the budget last year across both local service and road and bridge. And I believe Delani stated in her decades of experience here that was one of the 2 lowest that she had ever seen as a carryover balance. So whether there's a specific line item that did have this one $350,000, $370,000 left in it, there were other costs associated with the department that we ended up using those funds or shifting, and we may have even consciously made some of these decisions. But road seal, we went up $50,000. Fuel, we went up $200,000. It's about a 30% increase in cost. I think we've seen from the end of our COVID time to 2020 into 2020 to 2021, that cost has increased. We spent $731,000 last year. I think that there's a realistic possibility that fuel is going to go up. Saudi Arabia is not producing as much fuel as they were going to in OPEC, so $800,000, depending on cost, may not be enough money in that line item, but it's an increase of $200,000.
The amount of fuel looks to be consistent over the years. I like to use them more.
No, the amount of fuel may have even slightly reduced because the efficiency's gone up, but the cost of fuel has just gone up. Right. So it's just a cost of doing business. Ice and snow materials, we left at $375. Obviously, you can see that we were up over $265,000 last year, but we had a pretty mild winter. And so if we have a bad winter, that cost could easily inflate to $500,000, or could be another mild winter. So we kind of budget in between a mild winter and a bad winter at the $375,000 amount. One of the issues, though, is that line item is left to the end of the year. And so you're nearing the end of your budget, so you don't have a lot of recovery period where you could shift or adjust other expenditures, whether it be rock or oil, because it does come in there at the end of the year. Paint striping, we increased the line item by $50,000. As you can see, last year we were at $332,000. We've seen a significant increase in cost. We pre-bid the 2023 paint striping in order to lock in our prices, and at that time you only had a 10-day window to accept their bid because the cost of paint is just gone through the roof. There was availability issues last year with some of the paint on projects that contractors couldn't secure, but the cost of paint is increasing significantly. So
we started doing this in 2007. I think it was $180,000 then. So it really hasn't over the years gone up too quick.
Yeah, it's not.
I mean, not compared to some other things.
No, not compared to equipment.
Right.
But we're seeing a 15 to 20% increase in costs.
I got to take off. I got another meeting.
Okay.
I don't have any other questions on road and bridge other than I wanted to add we need more money for bridges and find some money for paving roads in the north end of the county still. Other than that, that's all I have for that.
Bridges will probably happen.
So the popularity of the dust control program, you'll see on the second page.
I had one question on the other page. You came in low on your tires. You got it budgeted for 90. You're going to come in low again, or is that
The tires.
it's 71.
So we came in at 71,000. It really depends on.
I don't know
the
where you're at.
condition.
I haven't looked on here where you're at now, but
So it really depends on tire costs. Tire costs have gone up a lot. That's why I didn't decrease that amount any, is that the cost of rubber has gone way up, tires have gone up. It depends on the year. A set of Grader tires is $7,000, so it doesn't take much. I don't even know. That could be an inaccurate number at this point. I know what Grader tires cost before some of these inflationary numbers. But you can spend a lot of money on large equipment tires, and some of our buybacks require a certain tread life left on them. And so while we didn't increase that amount, and we did spend slightly less, $19,000 less the year before, with the increased cost of rubber, I did not feel comfortable reducing that amount because we're running really lean on some of these other items with like salt, depending upon the winter. And that's where if we have to shift and overrun an item because of weather or fuel cost changes, I don't feel comfortable reducing some of these line items anymore.
I know what tires have went up. I don't think you should decrease them. You know, you may have 3 graders all at once that need tires. It depends on what year they were purchased or leased.
Yeah. Yeah, so
on the trucks, you've got to keep good tires on the trucks.
Yeah, and the tires that you know, not to offer too many complaints because they are really reliable trucks, but you're getting 10-ply tires on these new vehicles, but I don't know. The factory direct tires, even though they're 10-ply, they last about 15,000 miles on gravel, maybe the first set of tires, and they don't hold up well. They get kind of chewed up. And we do have a few employees, not very many, but we have some guys putting 30,000 miles a year on mostly county gravel roads that go through some tires. So as you move to the next page, dust control went up from $125,000 to $250,000. That cost continuously increases, and that's based upon some of that increased cost will be offset by increased revenue. But as we allow folks to do the 5-year interest-free, we're only collecting 1/5 of the payment each year. Some folks do choose to pay, not very many anymore, but some people do pay the full upfront costs. But even people who have the ability to pay that full upfront cost often are financing it for 5 years because then it comes through their taxes and they can then deduct it from their income taxes. So
on that fence material, the line above it, it looks like your actual's been low. You're still budgeting the $3,000. Do you have something?
Yeah, if we have to do a project, $3,000 is really not anything for fencing. So we try not. We've been using scrap material or material from other projects. We have a lot of panels out of the fence, out of the shop, but that's if we use it for one project and it's sitting there for several months, and we have another one come up. $3,000 in say paneling for fencing or buying a couple gates if we have to buy a gate or something for a property owner for a project. $3,000 does not go very far in fencing. In fact, that would only.
So when you have
$5,000, that would only buy about 250 feet.
So when this is coming in, let's say like these 2 fiscal years, 21 and 22, you end up budgeting $3,000 and you spend like 1 year it was 77. Can't see without my glasses. 79 or 200. Then you're rolling that back into your budget at other locations in your budget. Is that how that's?
It goes into cash carryover, or if he has a line item that runs over, it helps to carry it.
I can tell you where it goes. It goes into local service because local service runs out of money.
Yeah, well,
So that's, but that's,
we're not carrying over cash, so we only carried 100 in both budgets, which last year I don't have the exact number, but let's say both budgets are $16 million or something. We carried over of that less than 0.2% or something, $100,000. So there was no cash carryover. So anything that was unspent, like the $1,700 or the $2,700 in the fencing, we used
in another spot.
Yeah, we ran, whether it was gravel or whether it was fuel, we overran, or whatever that overrun cost was in another one because of unforeseen inflation costs. We overran some line items that we're trying to adjust to, but we did not carry over any cash.
No, I'm not. I'm just wondering what the logistics are of you, like when you, if you're over here, you just shift it to another fund.
I don't want to speak for Linda and Janet, but if you overrun a specific line item, that's one thing based upon it. We try not to overrun categories, and we try not to overrun. Obviously, we don't ever want to overrun our overall budget because we had to republish.
Yeah,
you'd have to take board action.
That's a budget violation.
Yeah, that's a budget violation.
We don't do that.
So we've never done it. We won't do it. But
in the budget.
from one line item to the other, we may find that fuel jumps to $4.50 a gallon, and then we have to then not put down as much rock in order to offset those increased costs because we have to operate in our overall budget capacity, but and provide a service. And so, with inflation and changing costs, we can't bid an entire year's fuel.
I'm just looking at we're going down through here, but I'm looking at the macro, we're talking about increasing this budget by $2,644,000. So
we haven't got to those line items yet.
Yeah. So
part,
we
haven't really got to the big increases. So what I feel that the budget from a operating standpoint is extremely lean. We didn't do any increases from an operating standpoint that you would see any significant change in the operation of the department, and we did not go up we tried to even hold some line items at less than the 1 year inflation rate because we had slightly overran them and we're hoping that things stabilize. So I think from an operations standpoint, the budget's extremely lean. Where you're talking about, we haven't gotten down to the bottom, but we can skip right on down to it if we'd like to.
You don't have to skip. You can keep going.
Yeah. So bridge materials, $15,000 in the cost of metals for bridge materials is not. We reduced it by $5,000 because we just really don't have a lot of bridge repairs that are unfunded from insurance claims or anything. Survey materials have gone up. Our survey department, as you can see, uses $16,000 in survey materials. As we become a robust surveying department that's really getting out and doing township surveys and doing a lot of work and knocking out some really good work and providing a service for the public in the field, those costs are going to be, there's going to be costs associated with getting all of that field work completed. And so there was a $15,000 increase for materials set aside for that. Equipment and parts, while we have most things under lease, the things that we still have out there that we would be responsible for, or the lease or the maintenance agreement has run out on, parts have gone up in cost, so we held that line item flat. Rock, which technically, speaking to Commissioner Smith's point about local service, a lot of the roads, we do have some county routes that are still gravel. Gravel has gone up by at least 10% in cost over the past year, and so that's reflected in this budget. Asphalt has gone up by more than 10% in cost in many cases, and that's reflected. We went from $1.85 million to $2 million. As you can see, we actually stopped asphalt work last fall because we knew our budget was getting so lean with some of these other items that were the result of inflation. So the $1.467 million that was actual cost, we could have easily put down several $100,000 more worth of asphalt patches and done asphalt work. But we were trying to operate within our approved budget and not go over.
Good thing you didn't.
Yeah, and we pushed it right up there to that razor edge. Sign material, aluminum costs have gone up, and they've gone up more than the 8% reflected here. But we had some unused funds last year, so we tried to look at what we could, $63,000. If you go up 15%, that's kind of where we came up with some of these numbers. Safety equipment's always important. We need to continue to buy some safety equipment, and then overall that gets us through the commodities portion of the road and bridge. Do you have any questions before I move on?
I'd just like to, again, point out, we talked about it early on, most of this spending is maintenance type spending. This is not new projects. This is maintenance type spending. Deferred maintenance has a cost. So if you reduce this, then you're just pushing that cost off, and it's going to be a lot more in the future. Some of this is catch-up, but for the most part, this is the minimum that they believe they need to maintain or attempt to maintain what we have. This is not like, we're going to go out and do a lot of new stuff. This is just trying to maintain what we have. And the money that's in this fund stays in this fund if it's unspent. Last year, the carryover was a record low because of inflation that occurred last year and into this year. So reducing contractuals here, or commodities in this case, reduces the amount of maintenance that we do on roads. It's the direct reflection.
Every dollar you spend on maintenance supposedly saves you 7 or 8, isn't it? Used to be, unless that's changed.
It's probably more now.
Probably more now.
I move ahead.
Please.
So, under capital outlay, we have facility improvements. Road and Bridge does not have a facility improvement fund that is set aside. It is just a year-to-year fund that is something that we could look at changing in the future, of building funds up for capital projects within the Road and Bridge Department in order to maintain that facility that we do have. Currently, we had been budgeting. We did ask for a $50,000 increase. I know that there has been, and I don't know if Commissioner Smith is part of this, goes back to his time there. One of the projects that we did bid this last year for $125,000 into 2022 costs was for a wash bay, heated wash bay. So during snowstorms and after storm events, when the temperature's not up, you'd have a wash bay that you could pull into that would be down on the east end of the existing area. I think we have room at the Tonganoxie Quarry to expand our salt storage if we ever wanted to. There are a lot of projects that could be completed. If you look at the previous few years, they put in new lighting. They had circuit issues with plugging in the trucks, all the new trucks and the heating elements, and all the trucks and graders out of the shop, so we replaced all the wiring going out to those pedestals. We've done a lot of different, we did the concrete work on the shop floor, trying to even it out so it was smoother. It was really pitted and uneven, and so they continue to do work. But in the future, I would suggest, Mark and I have spoke about it, that we could have a fund that we could build upon to set aside for some facility that would roll over and have some facility savings in order to not have one-time costs and changes in this line items.
Well, I'm trying to think what year it was. We were putting a little money aside every year for a car or a wash bay enclosed and all that. And I think we had it up to about $250,000, and then they took it out of our budget.
Heather took that.
Huh?
Yeah.
Do you remember the year? Okay, all right, yeah.
So because there are some, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
But if we would have built it back then, we would have been able to not have to fall under the new regulations where you have to put it in a containment. All the runoff goes into containment, and the containment has to be pumped away. But they took the money and lowered the mill levy or done something.
Now we're paying for it.
They didn't build a bridge, we know that. So, commissioners, some people listening might say, oh, heated washaway, that seems frivolous. But the importance of that is, again, deferred maintenance. We're putting down salt
Right.
throughout the winter. That salt sets on these vehicles and
Eats 'em
rusts
alive.
it away.
Yep.
We've had trailers where the truck beds where it's completely rusted through. Somebody stepped on it and it fell through. That's a legitimate thing to happen. So rinsing them off after each use extends the life, extends
Yeah,
the
I
usefulness
agree.
of the equipment.
Well,
so
it's
it's not frivolous. It's a need.
It's a need because of all the electronic components that are surrounded by on the engine, the transmission, all that. It
Nowadays,
just gets
yeah.
corroded, and you get one wire that's corroded, and you're dead in the water.
Trying to fix it the worst time of the year.
So you're seeing this fund like build up over a couple of years, and then you'll whatever
Then we'll take it.
Well, I don't know what the price of this.
A single bay, the smallest bay we could build was $122,000 for a single bay with a building in 2022. So, whatever the 2024 cost would be, it's going to be more. But that we bought the brine system, and speaking to deferred maintenance, I believe that they had Commissioner Smith buy a used brine system that never quite functioned properly, or maybe did for a while, but with this line item, we had bought that brine system in 2021, and that was part of that $76,000. Is we bought a brine system so we could be treating the roads with a brine solution, which saves you money and activates the salt and gets the roads cleaned off faster. And so it's a cost savings in the long run to have that system, and I think it's a cost saving to have the ability to wash these. And so,
But are you planning to use this $150,000 to make that happen this year, or is that going to have to wait another year?
it would be 2024. I mean, I don't.
It'd be in this budget.
Yeah, it would be in this budget. We would do
Right.
it next year. Like, it'll take us a while to get it planned. I'm sure there's permits now associated with it. You have to have a holding containment facility that you have to have pumped out. And so there would be logistical issues that need to be. Then I would take.
So if we were
it to
looking at a
year.
budget though, and we said, well, that's going to have to wait a year, that's kind of a budget decision.
Yeah, that'd be a budgetary.
Yeah.
When they kept deferring that off when I was
Just
out
costs
there,
more.
is because we were going to build a
doesn't
whole new
look like
facility
that like that.
with the sales tax money.
Like to
And then it never got on the sales tax list.
That's what
that
we're dealing with
building,
now.
the grand opening was 1962.
It's a long time ago.
That's older than you.
Yeah.
Ancient. It's ancient.
It is.
It is really old for the facility and the size of the county that we have now and the number of people that we're serving. It is a very small.
I mean, it's definitely a need, but I'm just saying when we get into this whole budget thing, that's something that has to be.
Save, because it
talked
costs
about.
more every year.
Well, we've got 1,000 things like that in the budget.
Well, but I'm just saying.
But you
there's
got to remember,
places where you
this
have to
facility
look
that the road department's operating out of was built just for the county routes. It was 11 years later before the county took over
right,
the township.
The township roads.
So this building was.
I'm more than happy to look at it. I just think that we have to be realistic that we're looking at everything is being looked at.
Well, and regardless of the budgetary decisions, there needs to be money in facility improvements because there isn't. If you have a major breakdown of some heating elements or different things, we don't have a fund necessarily set aside for facility improvements. That's a carryover fund that we need to start to establish as we move forward. So you have that maintenance fund, so you're not taking money from one line item to replace a $50,000 heater if it goes out in the middle of the winter. And so these things do happen when you're operating old facilities. So we'll move on unless anybody's got any additional questions. Transfer to capital improvement, as you can see, that we asked for reflecting what was discussed in the work session regarding bridges. Within the road and bridge fund, we did increase that request $1 million. Obviously, this is a budgetary decision, but I wanted to reflect the direction or the kind of the consensus that I had felt that the board held in that work session. And so that we increased that line item by $1 million, which, as we know from the ST-100 bridge, which is a fairly typical bridge, haunch slab on Fairmount Road, that cost was approximately $1.5 million for one bridge. And so while we do have a Capital 220 fund in local service, this cost, depending on the size of the bridge, could replace one bridge a year, possibly two in some years if they were, that 35 to 40 to 50 foot bridge length, or there was some sort of steel structure. So it would be dependent upon the type of structure. Obviously, we build the most cost effective we can, and so this would reflect anywhere from a half a bridge if it's HHP 19 to two bridges if you're talking about K45. And so that's where this number kind of.
You don't want to tell KDOT, no, we don't have the money to match the fund, so we're not going to
won't see it
bridge.
again.
Yeah.
And what we talked about on bridge during the CIP process was, I know in the past we've tried to do two bridges a year, but really we need to be doing three.
Right.
And at $1.5 million per bridge, you can see we're not budgeting for three. We're just trying to work our way up there eventually. But I know it's a significant increase, but again, this was something we discussed during the CIP.
But as long as we're getting KDOT money for these bridges, we've got to continue to fund this.
Yeah, I agree, Doug. Yeah.
Turn one down and see if your phone rings.
I've been there you're absolutely right.
So then the next line item is the 502 fund. We requested an increase of $250,000 to this fund. As you guys know, the cost of a dump truck has increased from $185,000 approximately in 2020 to now here in 2023, or even in 2022. The last one we purchased was approximately $290,000. The cost of the secondary equipment, the salt spreader, the plow, your hydraulic package, your controller for the snow removal, is costing almost what an entire dump truck did cost. Because we did bid the last one separately just to see the cost breakdown between the cab and chassis versus the beds and the hydraulic packages and everything. We had Frank bid this thing out as if we were going to custom build one ourselves and take it to all the different get all the different details ironed out and everything hooked up ourselves. And the cost of the secondary equipment is as much now as what 2.5 years ago, we could have purchased the entire piece of equipment for.
Turnkey.
And so we do have spreadsheets, so just like everything else, just like your capital improvement plan, just like your enterprise lease program, we do have a comprehensive equipment replacement schedule that we have projected clear out to 2027 currently. Actually, this sheet cuts off of 2027, but we have one to 2029 because we have things depreciated out further. And so we can break down the cost of these things, of what things are costing now, and we added a 10% adjustment year to year just to try to foresee any increased costs. But just so you're aware, these aren't numbers that we're just pulling out of thin air. I believe when I started, Frank came on board and we started to work on these together. We had a yearly cost in the depreciation with the county vehicles of approximately $875,000 is what it took to operate the department year to year. Obviously, this would put us up over a little bit over $1 million a year, and so you're still not reflecting a 100% increase in cost or 100% line item increase, but it is working it is a work in the right direction. So
I think when he's talked about that equipment, I want to just again touch on that. That's not a 4 to 10% inflation inflationary number that that the government has put out there. We're seeing double in a year on big equipment. Those are big expenditures. So we're just trying to keep up on that. And again, they have a fleet replacement schedule, just like we have a CIP. So we back into this number via what's it going to take us to keep up so we don't get to 5 years from now and come to you and say we need $1 million for equipment. And the way we purchase equipment has changed as well. And Bill and I have discussed this throughout the year that you used to bid a truck and it was a competitive bid process. It's no longer that way because you bid a truck and they say, here's what we're offering it at today, but when we actually get the truck, that might not be the price you pay. And those are the only options we have. And you're looking at, again, and maybe it's better now, but last year we were looking at a year out to get this equipment. So when somebody else's equipment became available, kind of like when you heard Connie earlier say that somebody had contracted for a van, but then when it came in, they couldn't actually close the deal because they couldn't afford it. We've taken advantage of some of those where other counties have bid on this equipment. It comes in and then they notify, we bid it at this price, but the real price is here, and they've said, we're not taking it. We've reached out and said, we don't like it, but at least we know what the fixed cost is. When we bid a product today, we don't know the fixed cost because you're telling us it's $300,000, but when it comes in, it might be $350,000. Right. Whereas we know today this one is $350,000, so we're buying it. And that's just the way equipment purchases have changed from just 3 years ago.
The worst three things that we have bid are dump trucks, semis, and minivans. Those items are extremely hard to get. If you're going to buy an American-made minivan, Dodge is the only supplier, and they open their window of ordering for about a week. And you have to be able to get your order in during the 1 week that they are offering new orders. And so that's why you do see the Council on Aging driving around a couple different mismatched colors, like they have a black minivan with a wheelchair lift. Well, another entity had purchased that, a school district, I believe, purchased that one. And then when they finally got it, it's 18 months later, and they're saying it's going to cost 10% more than what they originally agreed to with that school district. Well, that's the case. People reached back out to us and said, we're going to have to charge you an extra $12,000 for this, cab and chassis, and you can take it or leave it. You have a week to decide, because we have another 25 clients who will take it immediately if you back out of it.
Be gone.
And I don't think that it's the dealership that's making the additional money. I think that cost is the cost. They're just passing over the direct cost to us, not any additional profit to them from the bid.
Yeah, they reach out to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer says, today the price on this equipment is $100,000, but we will not promise that is the price when we deliver it in a year. And so then they come back and say, now we're delivering it, it's $120,000, and they pass that cost to us, which rightly so, I get it, but again, it's just not how we were used to doing business. I mean, before there was actually bid processes that people honored, and now they can't.
Yep.
And then some folks were also having a hard time getting bids. Like, you used to be able to bid it, and everybody you invited to bid on a piece of equipment generally.
Even the ones you didn't invite.
Yeah, even the ones you didn't invite. Now we're getting people saying, I can't bid that because
I can't deliver it.
In March was our 10-day ordering window, and now I can't order this piece of equipment for you until March of 2024, and it wouldn't be delivered till December of 2024, and I have no idea what the price is going to be by the time it's delivered 20 months from now. So some people are willing to take that risk, and different manufacturers have different windows that they open up, maybe a couple times a year for orders. But a couple times we've seen where we're only getting one bid. Well, we've sent it to everybody, and only one person's either has the availability or is willing to put themselves out there 20 months from now.
We did the nationwide look to see what's on is there anything sitting on a lot somewhere? And there's not. That was one of the questions. I said, is there anything out there that we could just go buy? And at least then we know the cost, and there's not.
Kind of the roll-off was one thing.
Oh, a truck to carry roll-offs for the transfer station. We were even looking for used, and the used stuff we found was more than we could get a new one for when you did the depreciation on it.
It was crazy. It was in Houston. We could drive to Houston and pick one up, but it was going to cost as much as a new one. It's just the new one we had to wait on.
So does that Houston Galveston site, do they still?
That's where this one was at.
That's where it came from?
That's where we finally found one that was used. It was 2 years, 3 years old.
He's talking about the purchasing contract, Houston Galveston.
Procurement.
Procurement, no.
That was just a used one that we could find.
Oh, okay.
And it was
used for government agencies.
Yeah, like the National Joint, NJPA or whatever, the National Joint Power Alliance, which I think is Minnesota and Wisconsin. We can still use that. We're members, I think.
But
they
can't get them either.
It doesn't help because they won't lock in those prices.
Right, you
Again,
can't
it's whatever the price is when they deliver.
Yeah, but you can't anymore.
I mean, even Mid-America Regional Council.
That's crazy.
So we had some money that we expended from ARPA funds for culverts. What line item is that reflected in?
That would not be in here. Our
It just-
funds have
it's-
to be tracked separately.
Just separately. And is that completed or are we done? I mean, we've got them all scheduled.
Yeah, they're scheduled. They'll be done by the end of next year when they have to be done.
There's a time frame on it, yeah.
We've got them permitted now. They are permitted for our Division Water Resources permits and our NOIs and all the different stream obstruction permits. And so now I believe we have 3 that we're getting ready to do right-of-way acquisition on probably in the next 2 weeks. 2 of them are on the 2 that we're going to try to squeeze in this fall that are contractor ones are on 206th Street, south of Evans. And then next year we'll do 4, and then the county crews are going to try to install 8. And those 8 that they're doing are mostly 96-inch culverts.
And when's the deadline for that to be completed?
Well, by the end of next year, we have to have everything committed.
Committed, not completed. Right? Is there a completion date when you have to
Yes,
have?
there is a completion.
Yes.
And it moves. So.
Oh, it moves. Okay.
We also have 2 bridges that we don't know the cost of, obviously, because we bid them. That were had identified as being able to be used for ARPA funds. So if those come back high, could offset the cost. We could have the plans ready for these box culverts, and we could exhaust all the ARPA funds before we get to, because of inflation, the construction period of those projects.
Well, I just want to put that out there because we are doing infrastructure work. I mean, that's happening.
Yeah.
So
if not for that, potentially there would be even more that we need to spend out of here. So.
We got plenty of rusted out culverts.
Yeah, we identified, Bill's crew identified the worst, the ones that were in the most need of repair and replacement. That's where we're
There was 14 box culverts or large culverts over 7 foot in diameter that we identified, up to 20 foot. Between 7 and 20 foot is considered, it's really between 48 inches and 20 foot is what's considered a culvert that we identify with a number here in the county. And so we identified 16 of those. Most of them are between 8 foot and 20 foot. 2 of them are on Eisenhower. That's the one for next year. We'll be closing Eisenhower.
now, like Commissioner Smith said, everything needs to be, as much as possible, put on some kind of a schedule. Do we have moving forward, our culverts are on a schedule to be replaced, or do we have that developed?
No, we don't have that because we don't have the funding for the bridges, and we don't have the funding, so we have a list of culverts, so we inspected with our interns every culvert in the county that had a number and identified a condition rating for all those. In those, we identified approximately 40 that were in marginal or poor condition that we need to address. But we itemized the 16 most urgent, or 14, most urgent ones in need of replacement. With the ARPA funds, we have not gone back and prioritized those remaining ones because we don't have any funding in order to construct them. So at the time that we find funding beyond bridges that we want to start setting aside, or if we have some that become an emergency.
So that's another need.
Well, yeah. Put an amortization schedule on each culvert pipe, but you're replacing these with all aluminized. We don't know how long aluminized lasts.
So I think
It's supposed to last a lot longer.
4 years ago, something like that. When the bill first came on, we came in and talked about what's true adequate funding. And we were about $4 million short of what true adequate funding is for maintaining what we have. We've tried to work towards that, but we were $4 million short then. I imagine even with this, we're probably still $4 million short because of inflation.
Okay.
So it's not frivolous. That's what I'm trying to get at. There's not frivolous. There's a decision that has to be made for budget, and we work within whatever the budget is that the Board of County Commissioners decides they want to approve and give to us. But if you doubled this budget, we could spend it on infrastructure to try to get caught up and to maintain what we have. We have how many miles of road?
765.
That's not cheap. We have how many bridges?
314 big culverts.
Yeah. So those things aren't cheap,
145 bridges.
and the cost just keeps going up every year, and so at a rate much higher than inflation, by the way.
And oh, by the way, all these culverts we're paying for with ARPA funds needed replaced anyways that we were going to have to pay for when the road fell in.
Absolutely.
And it will fall in
So
eventually.
when you talk about an amortization schedule, just to be clear, it would be nearly impossible for any county to amortize infrastructure.
That would be the Gatsby's deal.
That's what Gatsby, that's right. When Gatsby came out years ago, that's really what they were talking about. So what most places do is issue debt. When the time comes and we have, let's say we need to do 3 bridges and we only had money for 2, we would issue bonds for that 3rd bridge, and it would just go on to the taxes. So you can either increase it and we can pay as you go, or you can wait and we'll do it when we have to, and you're going to put that on the taxpayers anyway in the form of bond and interest. And again, we are very fortunate in this county. We do not have debt that is general fund debt. We have debt that is funded through a sales tax. But eventually, if you fail to fund these types of things, it will come out, we will have to issue debt, and that will be a tax increase. So you can do it now, or you can do it later. We're just trying to ease into it. And I know $1 million doesn't sound like easing into anything, but it really is.
Well, and the bottom line, what I think is really good, the decisions we've made is to use those ARPA funds for infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And
that's where our need is.
And that's because not every governing body across the country has done that.
I can try to take you out and show you about 30 of them large culverts that we poured concrete or flow fill in the bottom of them because the whole bottom was rotted out. And that was just to get by for a few years.
Doug, I did that
As
too.
far as I know.
I did that too.
Well, you had to do what you had to do.
I remember
I
doing
mean, just by our culverts, just a line item for culverts. You take one big pipe like that, a 96 inch or something.
Yeah,
It's
you're right.
huge.
Yeah.
Plus, you got every driveway. The county's responsible for the driveway culvert when it plugs up or rot. It's huge.
Yeah, so over 1,500 miles of ditches, which have culverts in those ditches. And those ditches, not counting the crossroad culverts, but all the ditch culverts are the responsibility of the county under current policy for driveway access and maintaining the road network. So.
And this is a primary responsibility.
I think that is one of our core functions.
Yeah.
Failure to take care of your infrastructure, it's one, it'll impact your bond rating eventually, but 2, it'll close roads.
Well, talk about that. Leavenworth County can't grow if we stay still or go backwards. We can't improve it for people who want to come out this direction.
But everybody wants us to be sure that we are looking at every line to make sure that we.
Everybody lives on a road.
They want us to get the.
It's the only service everybody uses.
Maybe not every day, but.
I haven't had a meeting.
So no more questions on road and bridge this time? Okay.
I don't have this.
I mean, just to note that this is going to be where we struggle to this is one of the largest parts, and this is where to get those resources over there is going to be the struggle.
That's where they always, this has happened for years, of not adequately funding the roads.
Right.
I lived it, I can tell you. This is why we're where we at.
Deferred maintenance.
Deferred maintenance,
Okay, we're at local service, road and bridge fund.
here's
Here
another
we go.
one.
So local service road and bridge, I'll just start.
I was just going to say, in road and bridge, Bill had mentioned, just kind of hit on it earlier, we probably will adjust one line item. It's not going to be the amount, we're just going to move it from one line item to another. Currently, we're transferring some lease payments for bigger equipment into equipment reserve and then paying it right back out. We're probably going to move those over just to lease payments, so it's a true reflection of what our lease payments are.
Yeah, we have a lot of departments still to hear from too, though, and elected officials, so it's early.
So, local service, I will state before I even start going through this, local service parts it has to be subsidized from road and bridge. We are one of 2 counties in the state of Kansas that when the county took the maintenance over of the local roads, of the townships, they did not dissolve the township taxation system. So it's an anomaly in the state of Kansas to have a county-maintained road system, such as we do here. It maintains all of the roads in the county, but also still have a township taxation system.
Funding, not funding, yeah.
And so we are one of 2 counties that falls underneath this hybrid of both systems. And so we do track the budget separately, and we do maintain our road network as necessary for the safety of the public as we can. And so within this budget, you'll see an increase in fuel as reflected in previous line items because those costs are unknown and increasing. We increased that line item by $40,000. We increased the rock budget by $150,000, which is the 11.5%, 12% that we had been seeing in the cost increase throughout the county to purchase rock. We reduced the equipment maintenance repairs because historically we have been keeping our equipment replaced, and those costs have kind of maintained a little bit lower level here lately, and we're hoping to continue that in the future. And then we left the road and asphalt seal alone, just trying to maintain a budgetary line item. We did pave. This is something that is unrealistic in the long term if you want to maintain the current state of the road infrastructure network, because as you guys are aware, I think we paved 42 miles in the dust abatement projects. Since I've started, I think we've done 35, and then there was one group done before I came on in 2020. And so overall, you have a lot of local roads that are now hard surfaced. Now, we have not entered into a period yet on those roads that were dust abatements where they're getting a lot of asphalt work done on them, be repaired, but those roads were thin asphalt coatings on a concrete treated base, and so they don't have the lifespan expectation of a road constructed from the ground up and with a 6-inch or 8-inch base of asphalt.
Yeah.
And so it is unrealistic to believe that that line item can remain. But looking at that and then discussions in the work session about bridges, and being realistic with what we have available for funding, but I wanted to point that out, that we did hold the asphalt line item the same, and moving forward, that is something.
But these roads are going to be sealed, chip sealed as when you're in the area anyways.
Yep.
They're just going to be into the cycle, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
But just as we need to do patching,
As long as
maintenance,
you keep them on the maintenance, they'll hold up.
they're going to hold up for years. But
Yeah.
they're going to require asphalt maintenance.
Right.
And we do have way more miles of local roads that are a hard surface.
And we're also adding the ones the homeowners are paying for, too.
That's correct. And we max that program out every year. And those are almost always local roads. So as we
nobody does it on a county route.
No, I don't think anybody's ever done one on a county route. So, if we're adding several miles a year paid for by the property owners, we added 42 miles. Mostly, I don't believe that any of those were county routes. We've got a lot more asphalt out there on these local service roads, and that cost will be reflected in the future.
Bill, maybe just touch base real quick on the difference between what road and bridge is and what local service road is.
So road and bridge is your county routes and your FAS routes. And so you have your federal aid system that was determined way back in the WPA days of determining what is your collector roadways here in the county. And then you have your local roads that were intended on servicing those those farm communities, farm areas back in the 30s that connected to your main thoroughfares. And so in a typical road and bridge township system, the county would be responsible for all of the bridges in the FAS routes or the county routes as they're designated here. And then all of your secondary network, all of your local roads would be maintained by the township. In this case, they're supposed to be maintained by the local service funds. And so as Leavenworth County has grown, you have seen some local service roads that have traffic volumes much higher than Kansas Avenue is one that comes to mind immediately is a local service road. It's not designated as an FAS route, and you see several thousand vehicles a day south of Pacer. And so you have some local service roads that have become major collectors just by development, but when they were created, your FAS routes were your connecting links, like your county route road system.
So years ago, before we adopted the new, before we took over the maintenance of the township roads, when the townships maintained them, each township had its own mill levy to maintain those roads.
Right.
So if you lived in one of those townships, your mill levy would have been higher. When we took over, we established an across the county local service road levy to maintain all the township roads. The difference in the road and bridge, what Bill is saying is the road and bridge are the major roads, the collectors. They're funded countywide. Every taxpayer in the county is levied a tax for road and bridge. Those are the main roads.
Even if you live in the city.
Even if you live in the city. The local service fund is supposed to be for all the other roads, the ones that aren't the major collectors, the old township roads. It should be self-funded.
Never has
The
been.
levy we collect in local service should be self-funded because those are the old township roads that the county took over. It's not. It is subsidized, and local service is only paid by people who live outside the city limits. So when you don't fund local service roads at the level that it needs to be, and you subsidize it by road and bridge, that means
people in the
folks
city
who live in the city are subsidizing the gravel and sometimes paved local service roads.
You're welcome.
That's why we've been trying for several years to slowly increase this to where it would no longer be subsidized. That lowers the levy that we assess on people in the city, but that means we increase the levy on the people who don't live in the city. Why is that important? Well, people who live in the city already pay the city a property tax to maintain the city streets. People who live in the county do not pay that. So typically it's like, let's just say, I'm going to say 30 mills. It's lower in some cities, higher in some. So of that 30 mills, that's for police and all the other services they provide. But probably around a third, maybe a little less, is for roads. If you put that same thing on out in the county, this mill levy should probably be at least 10 mills and maybe higher because we have a lot more maintenance on these roads that needs to be performed because of the gravel and the culverts and everything else. So I just give that as a background because each year I ask to increase that mill levy, and I know it's not a popular thing, but I only do that because it's being subsidized currently. It's not adequately funded.
Well, of course, the mill levy for that right now, I've forgotten.
8.8.
And you're saying around 10 is where it needs to be?
And last year we increased it, I think, a quarter.
Quarter. Not even quite a quarter.
Yeah.
Not quite a quarter.
Not quite a quarter.
So,
Okay,
and
gotcha.
again, it needs to just.
I got you.
So
Understand.
this year we will be asking for it to increase again. That's why I'm trying to give you this background.
Gotcha.
Well, I'll
Makes
give you
sense.
some background too. It used to be a whole lot worse with the addition of a lot of people moving, and it's helped it. So more houses on these roads helps that mill levy at the local service level.
But it also increases the wear and tear on them?
It
also
does,
increases
but if
Right.
So you said that
Complaints.
we're one of 2 counties that
complaints.
has this system.
Yes.
What's the alternative in other
Improve
counties?
them.
Give me
What do all the other counties
Yeah.
they do?
Yeah.
They either have a county unit system where you have a road and bridge fund
only.
Or they are a township system where they have the county maintains your
Like you said, the county
FAS
separate.
routes and the townships individually taxed. And so you could, instead of when you're driving throughout the county, when you would go from like Kickapoo Township, might be maintained at a different level than Easton Township, than Fairmount
So,
Township.
so like Douglas and Jefferson, are they?
Jefferson County is a county unit
County
system,
unit.
so they're responsible for all 845 miles of road. Douglas County is a township system. Shawnee
Okay.
County is a township system.
How did we end up with this hybrid?
I have no idea.
I asked that
In
question too.
1970, October
Yeah.
of '73, it went on. It went on the ballot. It was a vote of the people, and they voted for the county to take over the roads.
But still to have townships funding it in this mechanism.
Boy, then I don't know because there's that Linden area is the other county.
I think so. And their local service road is way higher than our local
Right.
service road.
Because it's self-supporting. Ours,
Yeah. Well, and I know your argument about the because they're country roads and they live out in the country and you got the people in the city, but the problem is you've got a lot more people when you're talking about a mill levy, you've got a lot more people to spread it out between when you are putting it on a basis of a full mill instead of your service roads. When you're putting a service road and you're raising that, you got fewer people bearing a higher burden.
that's why it used to be a lot worse, Mike. We were
Yeah.
out of money in July some years on it.
Which
So-
is why most of the other counties that do take over the roads leave it as a road and bridge fund, and it goes on everybody. But for whatever reason, when the vote was had back in 1972 or whatever, they decided to use this format, and in this format, the local service road is supposed to be
Self-supporting.
self-supporting.
It
But-
never has been.
But people that are in the cities are also using roads out in the county. They're also getting
That's
the
why
services.
they pay the road and bridge.
Right. So, I mean, so therefore there's an argument to be made that.
Well, Mike, in the
should-
county, people in the county aren't paying the city's
Yeah.
thing, so you can go back
Well,
the other way.
No, I mean, I'm just saying that, that,
Well, that's coming
That-
from somebody from the county.
No, I said thank you.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I heard Doug say it.
I'm just
I'm
trying
not saying
to
thank
give
you.
the counter argument on it.
But there's
so.
that's kind of a false equivalent. I mean, because then you're going to
That's
have
not the way
to-
people feel.
Well, how people feel and what is real are two different things.
Not always.
The bottom line is that, as people are building and moving out to the county, they're also
Growth.
having expectations of the county to raise theirs. I want my road paved.
Right. Oh,
I want my
absolutely.
road finished. And it's like the developers or the homeowner or whoever's bought the property, they are not realizing that that's not our responsibility. You
Not
know?
totally.
Well, but
Yeah.
then when we allow for and we vote for and give developers this land over here that's not in a city, that's in the county, and then we say we're going to take over the maintenance once you've put all of this in,
That's why we're trying to cut back on that.
yeah, then we're also increasing what the cost of the local road is what the cost of it is. we've automatically increased that, and we're not increasing what the people out in the county have to pay. We're increasing what the people in the cities and everybody, but the cities, I know, and everybody pays it, but the people in the cities are also having to pay for those types of improvements.
I understand the argument. I'm just telling you that it's a difficulty.
Well, I'm just telling
Nice try,
you,
Mike.
it used to be a lot worse. I mean, the houses that have been added in some of these subdivisions
It is
have
helping.
really increased the funds going into local service.
Because the
Right.
valuations are,
That and and you got more
These big
people,
More people
like
are
you said,
paying,
you got
which is
more
true.
people paying.
Into
But
it.
it hasn't caught up
Yeah.
with what the
It
costs are
hasn't caught up.
doing.
and it's not.
This has been a problem since 1973, and it's never been self-supported.
I think when after it's going to be dating now because of the cost of inflation, but I believe we did an analysis, Mark, of in about 2021 that
Yeah.
showed the average home cost, new home cost that year, I believe was like $440,000 is what the appraiser data showed. And so it took to maintain the current level of service on most gravel roads. It took, I believe, 7 houses in a mile of roadway. So 7 houses per mile of roadway before you met the cost of that without subsidizing that cost.
Balancing it out,
And we can look around the county and measure, but there's a lot of roads that have way more than 7 houses that are gravel, and we have roads that have way less than 7 houses.
Right.
And they have 2 or 3. So you have to average that 7 houses, which I don't think we've hit that population density in
And now we have houses that are selling for $750,000.
Right.
Easily.
That changes
The cost of maintenance has went up, like we were just
Right.
talking about as well.
But
Okay.
you take a few, like the subdivision down on County Road 2 that came on the tax rolls. You take the Eagle Crossing that came on the tax rolls.
Right.
I mean,
It is helping.
It has helped.
Absolutely,
I mean, I
it's
can tell you.
helping.
I mean, it's just.
So in this, we
July we ran out.
We only increased the transfer to the 220, which is your bridge maintenance fund, bridge replacement fund. It only went up $100,000 from $650,000 to $750,000 to reflect the work session.
Right.
And so between the two funds, they go to the same 220 fund. And so between the two funds, you would have a cumulative total of $2.5 million.
Right.
In going towards bridges per year. And then transfer to equipment reserve because of the increased cost of that heavy machinery. Most of this cost is heavy machinery in local service. Increased to $150,000 per year. That's the extent of the budget.
Okay. So this has nothing to do with budget. This is maybe a legal question. It would have to go on the ballot if we ever change from a local service in a road and bridge budget, correct?
I don't know that.
I've asked that question
I asked
as well.
that question as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a great question.
To fix that, and nobody seems to
I
know
mean
the
that
answer.
that is the key. That would be a good thing to get a legal opinion on.
But
Find out.
the chances of it passing would be slim because all your population's in the city.
That is true statement too, Doug. I think so.
Whatever.
That'd be
Well, unless they felt like it was there was some benefit.
But there isn't.
How it would benefit anybody.
There isn't any, Mike, for doing it
The
that
only way that
way.
it passed
It would
was
go up.
because that provision was.
That's what I'm guessing,
made.
that they voted on it and approved it because they said, well, it's not going to increase our taxes.
Mm-hmm.
But it is.
But it is.
Wrong again.
Well,
It's gotta
but
keep
it's-
slotting
I thought you were
I
going to
think-
ask you what it would take to go back to the township.
I asked that
No.
too.
That's what you.
Would that be a require a vote also?
Well, I think
That one would be very,
Yeah.
very.
No, I would just laugh. I said,
Yeah.
I
okay,
think it's
both
more
ways
efficient. It is way more efficient
to do it the way.
to do it the way we're doing it
Yes.
than to ever go back
We
to
just have
township.
to get to where we can pay for it.
Well, it's more efficient than each township owning a
Dump
backhoe.
trucks.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because that's what it comes down to. Is having all the
Well,
equipment
and the
to do it.
townships are so struggling right now with like
Just
the
fire
fire.
department.
Right.
It's just nobody wants to volunteer, and
And a fire.
yeah,
Iowa.
yeah. How much is that? 300,000.
How much?
I don't know. How much are they? I don't know.
1.5 to 2 million.
What's that, trucks?
3 or 4 year
I
waiting.
had
no idea.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
That's
yeah.
why-
I didn't know what
that's
the
why I said,
bar-
it's like, oh my
And
gosh.
that's not even a ladder truck.
Yeah, that's just
You
you're
could buy a
good.
used one for that much.
Yeah. They're usually going
Well, I haven't been in the
500,000.
market for one.
Well, let's hope we're not.
That's why we don't want to be, that's why we don't
Yeah, that's
want to
right.
run.
I'm good.
Well, we're good. Thank
All right,
you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
Bill.
Enjoy the rest of
So-
your.
Yeah, thanks. You
Final
made it, you
question.
gave us this hard.
You could not provide the same level of service or maintenance if you remain revenue neutral.
It'd be a service reduction by the
Service
amount.
reduction, staff reduction. Okay.
See a service
Yeah, it
reduction
does.
by the amount of inflation. So you'd
And
see
then, well, more inflation on what we pay, not just overall.
you might see a 20%
I'll grab it
reduction.
if I can find it.
It's right next to where Becky used to
Are we-
be.
Some bridges would be
Are we
out.
dismissed, Madam Chair?
We are done.
All
Thank you
right.
very much, gentlemen.